My son pressured me to cancel my surgery so I could stay home and look after the grandchildren, all so he could go on vacation. He said coldly, "If you don't do it, you'll never have another chance to hold a scalpel." At that moment, I understood this wasn't just a family matter anymore. This was a perfectly orchestrated trap. They believed they had cornered an old man, but they didn't know. The price they would pay would destroy everything. Thank you for being here with me. Before the story begins, drop a quick comment. Have you ever experienced a betrayal from someone you trusted completely? Yes or no is fine. Your perspective might help someone else today. One note: certain details are fictionalized for storytelling and reflection. The heart of the message is what I hope stays with you. My hands had been rock steady for 4 hours of pediatric heart surgery, but the moment my son's name appeared on my phone screen, they started to shake. I was 66 years old. 40 years as a pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon, the last 18 as chief at Texas Children's Hospital, and my hands had never trembled in an operating room. Not during the Walker triple valve repair last January. Not when the power failed during a transplant in 2019. Not even the morning after Iris died when I'd returned to work because a 7-year-old needed me, and grief was something I could schedule for later. But standing in the men's locker room on the 6th floor, stripping off my scrubs after 4 hours, repairing a congenital septal defect, in OR7, I stared at my phone and felt my fingers lose their certainty. "Stella Hampton, my son," I answered. "Dad," he said, and I heard traffic in the background, the particular rushed quality of someone calling from a car in Houston's late afternoon gridlock. "We need you to babysit for 2 weeks. Breyer and I found a deal for Tulum. We leave Thursday." Stella was 38. He worked in oil and gas sales at a midstream company in the energy corridor and had the particular desperation in his voice that came from living just beyond his means. I'd heard it before when he'd needed help with the down payment on the Spring Branch house 3 years ago, when Breyer's car lease had come due last summer, when Sawyer's private kindergarten tuition was higher than expected. "Stellan," I said, carefully pulling on my street clothes with one hand while holding the phone with the other. "I have a surgery scheduled Thursday, a 6-month-old. She's been waiting 8 months for a donor heart." Silence on the line. Not the silence of consideration. The silence of calculation. "We're your family," he said finally. "Sawyer's 5. Kai just turned 2. They need their grandfather more than some random kid needs another surgery." Some random kid. I sat down on the wooden bench between the lockers, still holding my phone. The infant's name was Emilia Chen. Her parents were both teachers in Katy. They'd been sleeping in the hospital family room for 3 weeks, waiting for the donor match, and I'd watched them take turns reading to her through the incubator glass Charlotte's Web over and over, because it was the only book they'd thought to bring when they'd rushed her to the ER in July. "Stellan, I can't cancel this surgery. I will make sure you never operate again if you don't understand my position. We're your family." The line went dead. I sat there in the empty locker room, the smell of antiseptic and industrial laundry detergent sharp in my nostrils, and tried to understand what had just happened. My son, the boy I'd raised alone after his mother, my first wife, left when he was 4, had just threatened to destroy my career because I wouldn't cancel a life-saving surgery to provide free vacation childcare. 34 years. I'd raised him alone for 34 years. Where had this voice come from? I drove my 2014 Lexus ES350 out of the medical center parking garage and turned south on Kirby Drive, the September heat still radiating off the pavement, even though the sun was starting to sink behind the high-rises downtown. Traffic was thick, and I had 40 minutes to replay the conversation in my head, searching for the moment I'd misunderstood. Maybe he'd been joking. Maybe the stress of planning a trip had made him careless with his words. Maybe. My phone chimed. An iMessage. Briar Hampton. My daughter-in-law, 36, who sold real estate in Memorial and Bunker Hill, and had learned to deliver cruelty through perfectly punctuated text messages. We've decided it's best if you take some space from the family. The boys have been confused by the tension. I read it 3 times while stopped at a red light on Bissonnette. Tension. What tension? I'd had dinner with them 2 Sundays ago. Sawyer, my 5-year-old grandson, who called me Papa Doc, because he'd heard the nurses say it once, had shown me his kindergarten artwork, a blue house with a red door and a yellow sun that he'd been so proud of. Kai, barely 2, had sat on my lap and fallen asleep while we watched a Pixar movie neither of us understood. There had been no tension. I pulled into the driveway of my red brick bungalow in West University Place at 5:30 p.m. Murphy was waiting behind the blue front door. I could see his golden shape through the frosted glass panel, tail wagging in the particular rhythm that meant he'd been patient, but was reaching the limit of his restraint. Murphy was 11 years old. Iris, my wife of 33 years, had given him to me as a surprise 5 years ago, 3 months before the cancer diagnosis. She'd been a pediatric ICU nurse at Texas Children's, and she'd understood what it meant to come home to an empty house after losing a patient. Murphy still waited at the door every evening as if she might walk through it, and I'd never had the heart to tell him she wasn't coming back. I sat in the car with the engine ticking as it cooled, Briar's text still glowing on my phone screen. Murphy's tail wagged behind the frosted glass. He didn't know yet that something had shifted. A memory surfaced, faint, easily dismissed. Last Christmas. Iris's mother, Eleanor, had visited from Galveston. We'd been clearing dishes after dinner when she'd mentioned something about her safe, about documents Iris should review. I'd been standing at the sink, and I'd seen Iris's face shift in the reflection of the kitchen window, that particular expression she wore when she was deciding whether to say something or wait. Mother mentioned the safe again today, she'd said later when we were alone. I should check on that. But I'd been thinking about the Walker case scheduled for the following Monday, running through the valve sequences in my head, and I'd made some distracted sound of agreement without actually asking what she meant. I never asked. She died 4 months later on an April morning, and I'd forgotten all about Eleanor's safe until this moment, sitting in my driveway, with my son's threat echoing in my ears and my daughter-in-law's text cutting me off from my grandsons. What had Iris been about to tell me? Murphy barked once, sharp and expectant, and I realized I'd been sitting in the car for nearly 10 minutes. Tomorrow, I told myself, unlocking the door and letting Murphy's joy wash over me in waves of golden fur and unconditional love. Tomorrow morning, I would drive to their house in Spring Branch. This was a misunderstanding. Daylight and a face-to-face conversation would fix it. It had to. The question about Iris's mother's safe faded by morning. Wednesday arrived with September heat already thick by 7, and I made my decision at 7:42 a.m. standing in my kitchen, with Murphy at my feet and yesterday's coffee cold in the pot. I would drive to Spring Branch and fix this face-to-face. "Stay here, buddy," I told Murphy, scratching behind his ears. "I'll be back in an hour." The drive took 21 minutes. North on Kirby, west on I-10 past the Galleria and the Energy Corridor exit, where Stellan worked. Then north into the subdivisions where young families bought semi-detached brick houses with oak saplings in the front yards. I'd helped Stellan with the down payment 3 years ago. $42,000 wire transferred on a Thursday because the closing deadline was Friday. He'd never mentioned paying me back, and I'd never asked. That's what fathers did. My palms were damp on the steering wheel despite the air conditioning. I rehearsed what I would say. "I understand you're stressed. Let's find another solution." "Too weak." "Stellan, we need to talk about yesterday's call." "Too confrontational." I settled on what Iris would have said. "I came to listen. Tell me what's really going on." I turned onto Pinemont Drive at 8:35 a.m. The Harris County Sheriff's cruiser was parked directly in front of 7421 Stellan's address. My first thought was that something had happened to one of the boys. My foot hit the brake. I scanned the scene, no ambulance, no fire truck, just the white cruiser with its light barred dark. Maybe a break-in, a neighbor's complaint. I parked across from Stellan's house and walked up the driveway, concrete already radiating heat through my shoes. The oak tree I'd planted with Stellan when he was 12 stood taller than the house now. Two officers emerged from the cruiser as I approached the front steps. "Sir," the older one called out, hand raised. "Are you Dr. Virgil Hampton?" I froze with my finger an inch from the doorbell. "Yes." Officer Brennan, the name stitched above his badge, mid-40s with graying temples and weary professionalism, pulled a folded document from his belt. His partner, Officer Hayes, younger by a decade, stood behind with his hand resting on his radio. "We have a temporary restraining order issued this morning by Harris County District Court," Brennan said. "Petitioners Stellan and Briar Hampton versus respondent Virgil Hampton. You are hereby ordered to cease all contact with the minor children, Sawyer Hampton and Kai Hampton, and to maintain a distance of no less than 500 feet from this residence." The words reached me through a strange thickness, like I was hearing them underwater. "There must be a mistake," I said. "I'm here to talk to my son. I haven't threatened anyone." Brennan kept reading, tone flat. "The petition alleges a pattern of erratic and threatening behavior toward the minor grandchildren over the past 2 months, escalating to verbal aggression and inappropriate comments about parenting decisions. How does a man who spent 40 years repairing children's hearts become a threat to his own grandchildren overnight?" I opened my mouth to protest, but a sound stopped me. A whisper, barely audible from behind Stellan's front door. Briar's voice. "Just keep saying he was yelling. They'll believe us." The door was 6 inches of solid oak. She must have been standing directly on the other side, speaking to someone I couldn't see. Maybe Stellan. Maybe a lawyer on speakerphone. Officer Brennan either didn't hear it or chose not to acknowledge it. He extended the document toward me. "One, you need to leave the premises immediately, Dr. Hampton. Violation of this order is a criminal offense." I took the paper with hands that had sutured infant hearts, that had never trembled during a transplant, that had held my grandsons while they slept. Officer Hayes gestured toward my car. "We'll escort you back to your vehicle, sir." The walk across Stellan's front yard past the oak tree where his small hands had once patted dirt around the sapling, where I'd taught him to identify red oak from white oak by the leaf shape, took 17 steps. I counted them. It was the only thing that kept me from turning around and demanding to know what lie had been told. The neighborhood watched. Curtains moved in the house to the left. A man paused his lawn, edging 2 doors down. As Officer Brennan opened my car door and watched me slide behind the wheel, I looked up at the neighboring house, 7419 Pinemont. A girl, maybe 14, sat at the second-floor window. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, phone pointed directly at the scene below. Our eyes met for half a second, hers wide, startled at being noticed, before she lowered the phone and disappeared behind the curtain. Cassandra Mercer. I would learn later. She lived at 7419. Pinemont was in 9th grade at Spring Branch High and remembered me from 3 Halloweens ago when I'd given her homemade brownies that Iris had baked. The video she'd just recorded, 6 minutes and 23 seconds, labeled "Strange Stuff" in her iPhone 13, would become the most important evidence of my life. But in that moment, sitting in my car with Officer Brennan's hand still on the doorframe and the restraining order burning on the passenger seat where Murphy usually sat, I didn't know her name. I only knew that something had been set in motion that I didn't understand. And the only thing that made sense to a man trained to solve problems methodically was to go home and start looking for answers. I drove back to West University in a fog, and when I pulled into my driveway 43 minutes later, Murphy was waiting behind the blue door just as I'd left him. I went straight to the basement and pulled out the gray metal filing cabinet. The girl at the window would haunt me later. For now I had the filing cabinet. The basement had 4 drawers of gray metal and a flickering fluorescent bulb overhead. I'd kept every significant financial record for 30 years in the same methodical way I'd kept surgical notes, and if Stellan claimed I was erratic, the numbers would tell a different story. Murphy followed me down the wooden stairs, his nails clicking on each step. He settled on the concrete floor beside me as I pulled the second drawer open and extracted the folder labeled Family Financial 2017 to 2025 in my own careful print. 8 years of bank statements, check stubs, wire transfer confirmations. I spread them across the concrete floor in chronological order, the paper cool and slightly dusty under my fingers. The basement smelled like stored cardboard and the faint mineral scent of foundation concrete. Above me, the fluorescent light buzzed and flickered, casting unsteady shadows. I found a mechanical pencil in my shirt pocket and turned over a Texas Children's Foundation fundraising envelope to use as scratch paper. April 2017. Wire transfer $18,500. Down payment assistance for the Spring Branch house. I remembered signing that one at my kitchen table while Stellan stood behind me, explaining that it was a loan that he'd pay me back when the first year's bonuses came through. August 2018. Check number 4127 $3,200. Montessori school deposit for Sawyer. Stellan had called it an investment in his grandson's future. Spring 2019, $1,400 bridge loan. I couldn't remember what that one had been for. January 2020, $750 occupational therapy copays for Kai's speech delay. Then the pandemic year's groceries I'd ordered and had delivered to their house. When Briar was too anxious to go to the store, the HVAC repair I'd paid for, when their air conditioning failed in July 2020, and Stellan's commissions had dropped. September 2021. Monthly transfers began. $400 like clockwork the 15th of every month. I'd set them up as automatic because Stellan said the oil and gas market was recovering, but cash flow was tight. I added the columns 3 times, checking my arithmetic the way I'd been taught in medical school: measure twice, cut once. $145,228, I said aloud to Murphy. I calculated it 3 times. He raised his head and looked at me with those patient brown eyes. I'd spent 40 years repairing holes in children's hearts. It turned out I'd missed the one in my own family. Tucked between 2 bank statements from 2019, I found a slip of paper 3 inches by 5, the kind Iris used to keep in the kitchen drawer for grocery lists and phone messages. Her handwriting left slanted and steady. Korean War Scholarship in memory of Dad, $5,000, paid May 12, 2019. Iris's father had served in Korea. He died when she was 16, and she'd put herself through nursing school on scholarships and night shifts at a Galveston diner. Every year on Veterans Day, she donated to a fund that sent children of Korean War veterans to college. Below the main note in smaller script, Stellan said he would repay when the renovation loan cleared. I turned the slip over. On the back, 3 words in Iris's handwriting, added later in darker ink. He took them. The memory arrived fully formed, sharp-edged. Christmas dinner 6 years ago. December 2018. Iris's mother had driven up from Galveston for the week. We'd gathered at our house. Stellan and Briar still lived in an apartment then before the Spring Branch purchase. Stellan was 32. Sawyer was barely walking. We'd been sitting at the dining table, the good china out turkey and stuffing, and Iris's mother's sweet potato casserole. I'd been carving the bird when Iris's mother said almost casually, "Iris, I can't find grandmother's pearls. The ones I kept in your bedroom safe." Iris had frozen mid-motion serving spoon suspended over the green beans. 2 seconds of complete stillness. Then her eyes had shifted to Stellan seated across from her. I'd seen his face change in real time from normal holiday pleasantness to something anxious, then carefully, deliberately blank. Iris had set the platter down very slowly. "I'm sure it's just misplaced, Mother," she'd said quietly. "We'll look after dinner." The subject never came up again. I'd been preoccupied with the Walker case, a 3-month-old infant with a complex pulmonary valve defect scheduled for the day after Christmas. I'd spent most of that dinner mentally reviewing the surgical approach, the timing of the valve replacement, the post-operative monitoring protocol. I'd filed the Pearl moment as family tension. Iris handled it and never asked. Sitting on the basement floor now with Murphy's head resting on my knee and the slip of paper in my hand, I understood. Iris had checked the safe afterward. She'd confirmed what her mother suspected. She'd confronted Stellan privately, probably that same night or the next morning, while I was at the hospital running pre-op labs on the Walker infant, and she'd chosen not to tell me. Not because she was hiding it, because she'd known I had a child's life in my hands the next day, and she'd made the calculation that my surgical focus mattered more than family theft. The pearls had been worth $8,000, a family heirloom 3 generations old. Stella had promised to repay the scholarship fund when the renovation loan cleared. He never had. Murphy shifted beside me, pressing his weight against my leg. He raised his head and looked at me with Iris's same brown eyes, the last gift she'd given me, and maybe the only one that hadn't asked for anything back. I held the slip of paper up to the flickering fluorescent light. Iris's handwriting, steady and clear, documenting what Stellan had promised and never delivered. Below her note about the scholarship in smaller script I'd nearly missed were those 3 words, "He took them." She'd known about the pearls. She'd documented it. She'd chosen what to tell me and what to carry alone. The question crystallizing in my mind wasn't what Stellan had stolen. The question was, what else had Iris known and chosen not to tell me? What else had she documented in her careful left-slanted handwriting, trying to protect me from distractions while I held scalpels over open chests? I looked at the folders still in the filing cabinet drawer. 8 years of records I'd organized methodically and barely reviewed. If she documented this much, maybe there were other records I hadn't found yet. Other slips of paper. Other quiet notations. Other moments when she'd seen something wrong and chosen to shield me from it, because a child's heart needed repair and my hands needed to stay steady. I spent the afternoon searching for more of Iris's notes, but found nothing. By evening, I'd shifted focus to what I could document now. At 9:23 p.m., I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of Glenfiddich neat and my iPhone charging beside me, scrolling back through 8 months of text messages from Stellan, searching for the moment when my son had stopped being my son. January. Dad, can you cover Sawyer's swim lessons this month? Cash is tight with the new HVAC. February. Need to borrow $800 for car insurance. We'll pay back when bonus clears. March. Why haven't you responded? I asked 3 days ago. April. The replies became shorter, terse. My questions about the boys went unanswered for days, then weeks. May. We need space to work on our marriage. Please stop asking about visiting. June. Radio silence for 3 weeks, then, Breyer says you're putting too much pressure on us. I was reading July's messages when the notification appeared at the top of my screen. Breyer is sharing her screen with you. I stared at it. I'd never used screen share with Breyer. I'd barely used it with anyone. It was a feature Iris had set up once to help her mother troubleshoot an iPad, and I'd never touched the settings since. The notification expanded. A window opened. I was looking at an iMessage conversation between Breyer and someone labeled Mom, not me, her mother. The messages were appearing in real-time live as they typed. Breyer. We just need to push him a few more weeks until the conservatorship petition is filed. Mom's lawyer says we have a strong case if we document the erratic behavior pattern. I stopped breathing. Mom. Make sure Stellan stays in line. He keeps almost telling. We need to keep the pressure up until Tulum once you're out of the country for 2 weeks. The petition hearing can proceed without interference. Breyer. The restraining order this morning was perfect timing. Now we have documentation of refusing to comply with boundaries. Mom. What about the evaluator? Breyer scheduled for next Wednesday. I coached Stellan on what to say. Memory lapses, repeated questions, forgot Sawyer's school schedule twice, asked about Iris like she's still alive. The psychiatrist just needs 3 incidents to support cognitive decline. Mom and the neighbors. Breyer Mrs. Kowalski 2 doors down will give a statement. I told her he rang her doorbell at 11 p.m. asking if she'd seen his wife. She believed it. I read the messages twice. 3 times. The words didn't change. Court-appointed evaluator. The phrase sat on the screen like a diagnosis I'd seen too many times before malignant invasive terminal if untreated. Breyer. Once the conservatorship is granted, we'll have full access to the accounts. The retirement fund alone is $2.4 million, plus the house equity and the medical malpractice settlement from 2016. Mom. What about his surgical income? Breyer. The conservatorship includes medical decision-making authority. We can petition to have his hospital privileges suspended pending neurological evaluation. Without the surgery income, he'll need the retirement fund for care, which we'll control. The conversation continued for 7 minutes. I watched motionless as Breyer and her mother discussed which asset accounts to liquidate first, how to transfer the house into a trust they'd manage, whether to sell my car or just take the keys. They debated whether I should be moved to assisted living immediately or after 6 months. Let him stay in the house through Christmas, Breyer's mother wrote. It looks better for the court if we show we tried to maintain his independence. Agreed, Breyer replied. Plus, Stellan gets weird about the house. He keeps saying his dad planted the oak tree in the backyard when he was 8. Stellan needs to focus, her mother responded. This is for the boy's future. College funds don't build themselves. At 9:30 p.m., the screen share ended abruptly. Someone had realized the mistake. I sat motionless, with the phone in both hands. Murphy raised his head from his bed in the corner, sensing something shift in the room. The restraining order this morning. The take some space text yesterday. The Tulum vacation demand that I cancel a life-saving surgery. None of it was spontaneous family conflict. It was a timeline. Create documented erratic behavior, refusing to cancel surgery, allegedly ringing neighbors' doorbells at night, asking about my dead wife. Escalate with a restraining order, establish that I'm a threat to my own grandchildren. Leave the country during the conservatorship. Hearing minimize my ability to defend myself, make it look like I'm too unstable to even appear in court. Gain legal control of my assets, my medical license, my house, my life. Breyer's mother's lawyer had been building this case for weeks, maybe months. The court-appointed evaluator was already scheduled for next Wednesday. The petition had been filed before the restraining order, possibly before Stellan's phone call demanding I cancel Thursday's surgery. They'd needed me to refuse something unreasonable so they could document my erratic choice to prioritize a stranger's child over my own family. Every word, every demand, every text message had been constructed to build a legal case. But one detail caught and held. Stellan keeps almost telling me what? That he didn't want to do this. That Breyer was pressuring him, that the whole thing was her mother's idea, and he'd been dragged into it. Or was he almost telling them something they didn't know, something about Iris or the pearls or the money I'd been sending for 8 years? Murphy crossed the kitchen and placed his chin on my shoe. He'd done the same thing the night Iris died, when I'd sat at this table unable to move until dawn, trying to understand how a healthy woman could have a cardiac event in her sleep and be gone before the paramedics arrived. It's not an argument, I said aloud to Murphy. It's a plan. He looked up at me with those brown eyes that were the last thing Iris had chosen for me. I set the phone down on the kitchen table. For the first time in 38 years, I understood that I didn't know my son at all. Or worse, I'd known him perfectly well, and chosen not to see it the same way I'd chosen not to ask about the pearls, not to question why the renovation loan never cleared, not to wonder why Iris had gone quiet that Christmas when her mother mentioned the missing necklace. The question wasn't whether to fight back. The question was whether there was anything left worth fighting for. I picked up the phone again and scrolled to my sister's contact. Lorraine would know what Iris would have said. Iris had always known things I didn't. The answer came before I finished the thought. Yes. There was something worth fighting for, the truth about what had happened to my family and whether any part of it could be salvaged. I called my sister at 10:08 p.m., a Wednesday night call to someone I only spoke with on Sundays, which meant she'd know before I said a word that something had gone catastrophically wrong. Lorraine picked up on the second ring. No greeting, no hello. Tell me. The same two words she'd used the night Iris died 5 years ago, when I'd called her at 3 a.m. from Texas Children's Emergency Department, unable to form a complete sentence. My sister Lorraine, 63 and living in Asheville, had spent 30 years as a children's librarian and possessed the kind of calm, unshakable directness that came from managing chaos in quiet voices. She could silence a rowdy child at 20 paces with nothing but eye contact. I told her methodically the way I'd present a surgical case to residents. The phone call, Tuesday afternoon, demanding I cancel Thursday's infant surgery for 2 weeks of vacation babysitting. Briar's text 40 minutes later. We've decided it's best if you take some space from the family. Wednesday morning, driving to Spring Branch to talk face-to-face, finding police waiting with a restraining order, claiming erratic and threatening behavior toward my grandchildren. They filed a restraining order this morning, I said. Claimed I'm a threat to Sawyer and Kai. I've never... I know, Lorraine said quietly. Keep going. The basement filing cabinet. $145,000 transferred over 8 years, every loan promised, and never repaid. Iris's slip of paper documenting the Korean War scholarship with 3 words added later, he took them. The pearls. Christmas 2018. Iris going silent when her mother mentioned the missing necklace. And tonight I saw their iMessage thread by accident, I said. It's not family conflict, Lorraine. It's a legal ambush. They've been planning this for weeks. Court-appointed evaluator scheduled for next Wednesday. Conservatorship petition already filed. They're coaching Stellan on what to tell the psychiatrist. Memory lapses, repeated questions, claims I asked about Iris like she's still alive. Lorraine listened without interruption. I heard her breathing steady, and even the way she'd breathed beside Iris's hospital bed during those last 72 hours reading aloud from Jane Austen while machines beeped and I sat frozen in the corner chair. 8 seconds of silence on a phone line is an eternity when you're waiting for your last living family member to tell you whether you've lost your mind or your son has. I heard a clock ticking in her Asheville living room, a car passing on the street outside. Then her question, unexpected and legally precise. Virgil, do you still have power of attorney for Stellan? The one you set up after Iris passed in case he ever needed medical decisions made. I stopped. The mutual POAs. We'd established them in 2020 during the pandemic, after Stellan had gotten COVID and been briefly hospitalized with pneumonia. Briar had been terrified, calling me every hour for updates. We'd agreed then, Stellan and I both, to set up reciprocal powers of attorney. If something happened to him, I could make medical decisions. If something happened to me, he could. Simple pandemic-era contingency planning that had seemed reasonable when my son was struggling to breathe in a hospital bed. Yes, I said. From 2020. It's never been revoked. Ah, good, Lorraine said, and her voice shifted to something harder. You go to the bank first thing tomorrow morning. Pull everything. Every account where his name appears as POA or beneficiary or anything else. Do it before he thinks to freeze them. I blinked at the kitchen table, Murphy's weight warm against my leg. Lorraine, how do you... I read Virgil. I've spent 30 years recommending books to people going through divorces, bankruptcies, elder abuse cases. You think I don't know what financial manipulation looks like? Her voice softened slightly. They're building a conservatorship case to control your assets. You have a legal document that gives you access to his. Use it. Document everything. Pull account statements. If there's money you can legally withdraw to protect, do it. But mostly document. She paused. This isn't about revenge. It's about evidence. You're going to need proof of what he's done, and the bank records will show patterns. Dates, amounts, timing that matches up with the conservatorship planning. I realized I was holding my breath. Tomorrow morning, she said firmly. Promise me. I promise. Another pause, longer this time. When Lorraine spoke again, her tone had changed softer, almost fragile. Something I'd never heard in 63 years. Brother, I'm coming to Houston next week. I have something I need to tell you in person. What is it? Next week, face to face. She exhaled slowly. But tonight, go to the bank tomorrow. Get the records. Protect yourself. And Virgil, yes, Iris knew. Whatever you're afraid you missed, whatever you think you should have seen, she knew. She chose to carry it so you could keep your hands steady in the operating room. That was her decision, and it was made out of love. Don't turn it into guilt. My throat closed. How did you... Because I knew her too, Lorraine said quietly. Better than anyone except you. And I know what she would say if she were here right now. What? Fight. Not for Stellan he made his choices. Fight for Sawyer and Kai. Fight so they don't grow up thinking their grandfather was a dangerous, erratic old man who had to be locked away. Fight for the truth. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table with Murphy's head resting on my knee, replaying Lorraine's final words before the dial tone. I have something I need to tell you in person. Her tone had shifted in a way I'd never heard before. Not the fierce, library-honed directness that could silence chaos with a whisper, but something quieter, almost afraid. She'd gone with me to every hospital where Iris had stayed during the cancer. Slept on vinyl chairs, brought me coffee at 4 a.m. Never once asked if I was okay, because she knew the answer. Tomorrow I'd go to the bank the way she'd insisted, but next week when she came to Houston, I'd learn what it sounded like when my sister needed me the way I'd needed her tonight. Lorraine's question would have to wait. Thursday morning, I had a bank appointment to keep. The Northern Trust office on Post Oak Boulevard had brown leather chairs and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Galleria, and at 9:02 a.m. I sat across from a wealth advisor named Roxanne Rawlings and asked her to pull every account where my name or my son's name appeared. Roxanne Rawlings. The certified fiduciary advisor I'd worked with for 12 years had the kind of controlled professionalism that meant she could tell you your portfolio had collapsed without raising her voice above library volume. She was 50, wore navy suits that looked expensive but not ostentatious, and had managed my retirement assets since I'd consolidated accounts after Iris died. She'd gotten my voicemail at 8:47 a.m. requesting an urgent meeting. She could tell something was wrong. All accounts, I repeated. Personal retirement faculty practice, and anything linked to Stellan Hampton, my son. I have power of attorney from our 2020 pandemic arrangement. Roxanne's fingers moved across her keyboard with the efficient precision of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. Her screen filled with account numbers, balances, transaction histories. 23 seconds of silence. I watched her expression shift from routine review to something more controlled. more careful. She turned the monitor toward me. Dr. Hampton, do you recognize an equity loan opened May 14th of this year for $750,000, secured against your faculty practice retirement assets? I stared at the screen. May 14th, 2024. I'd been in surgery that day. An 8-hour repair on a child named Avery Cole, 18 months old, who'd been born with transposition of the great arteries and needed arterial switch surgery we'd delayed until she was strong enough. I'd scrubbed in at 7 a.m. and hadn't left OR 7 until after 3 p.m. on the 14th. I said slowly. I was in surgery that day, an 8-hour repair on a child named Avery. While I was scrubbing out, my son was here forging my name. Roxanne printed the loan documents without comment. She placed 2 pages side by side on the desk between us. On the left, the loan affidavit line requiring wet signature, a physical pen on physical paper, witnessed and notarized. On the right, my specimen signature from my 2018 account opening documents. The forgery was clear even to my untrained eye. Different slant, wrong pressure points, hesitation marks where Stellan had paused, uncertain of the next letter. The loan requires personal appearance and wet signature. Roxanne said, her voice precise and legal. The documentation shows a signature date of May 14th at 2:47 p.m. The notary stamp is present, which suggests either notary fraud or identity misrepresentation. She pulled up another screen. The funds were transferred that same day to an account at Chase registered to Stellan and Briarhampton joint holders. The loan has 4-month deferred payment terms, meaning the first payment came due September 14th, 5 days ago. I'd spent 40 years repairing congenital defects holes, where walls should be valves that wouldn't close chambers that couldn't pump. But I'd never learned to recognize the same pathology in my own family. This constitutes financial elder abuse under Texas Penal Code 32.55. Roxanne continued, her tone still library quiet. A third-degree felony. We have grounds to refer this to Houston Police Department Financial Crimes Unit if you wish to proceed. $750,000. 5 times the amount I'd calculated in my basement 2 nights ago. Not yet, I said. I want to consult an attorney first, but I need you to flag the power of attorney on all accounts. Cancel every standing transfer to my son. Roxanne nodded and pulled up a transfer schedule. Currently active $600 per month to Stellan Hampton's joint account with Briarhampton at Chase. $400 per month to an educational fund for Sawyer Hampton account holder is Stellan Hampton as custodian. 2 ad hoc transfers averaging $200 each per month, varying dates. She looked at me. Cancel all of them, I said. Effective immediately. Her fingers moved across the keyboard. 3 clicks. 4. A confirmation screen. Done. The changes are effective as of 9:47 a.m. today. I'm also flagging your POA status and requiring in-person verification with photo ID for any future access. I'll have our forensic signature analysis team prepare a full report comparing the loan signature to your specimen files that will be ready by end of business today. She printed a summary page and slid it across the desk. Documented with timestamps. When you're ready to proceed legally, we have everything you'll need. I walked out of Northern Trust at 9:47 a.m. into Houston's September heat. The sun was harsh after the controlled cool of the office. Post Oak Boulevard traffic was building Galleria shoppers' business meetings, the steady Thursday rhythm of a city that never stopped moving. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from Stellan, received at 9:58 a.m. Dad, is there a problem with the account? The transfer didn't go through this morning. I stood on the sidewalk, phone in one hand, Roxanne's printed analysis in the other. 11 minutes. Not hours. Not the next day when he'd check his account balance. 11 minutes from the cancellation timestamp to his text. He had real-time notifications enabled. He was monitoring my accounts the way I used to watch surgical monitors during transplants, heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, waiting for the number that would signal crisis. He wasn't at work in his energy corridor office managing oil and gas sales. He was watching my money. I looked down at the forensic analysis in my hand. The forged signature. The $750,000 loan, May 14th at 2:47 p.m., while I'd been closing Avery Cole's chest with sutures so precise they'd dissolve without scarring. The restraining order. The conservatorship petition. The screen share conversation about seizing my retirement accounts and suspending my hospital privileges. It was all connected. Not separate acts of betrayal, but a single coordinated plan. The loan payment had come due 5 days ago. They needed the conservatorship granted before the bank started asking questions about why I wasn't making payments on a loan I'd never signed. I stood on Post Oak Boulevard in the September heat, holding Stellan's text in one hand and Roxanne's analysis in the other. The question wasn't whether he'd forged my signature for $750,000. The question was, what else had he forged that Roxanne hadn't found yet? I needed to find what Iris had left behind. If she'd documented the pearls, maybe she'd documented more. The forgery question would have to wait. First, I needed to know what Iris had seen. I drove home from Northern Trust with Roxanne's forensic analysis on the passenger seat, and a single thought circling if Iris had documented the pearls in that handwritten slip. Maybe she'd left other records I'd never thought to search for. At 2:34 p.m., I sat at the old desktop computer in my study, the one Iris had used for recipe searches and email still running Windows 7 with a password I'd never changed. Murphy lay by the chair, chin resting on his paws. I logged into her AOL account. The inbox was frozen in time at April 20th, 2023, days before she died. Appointment reminders, pharmacy refills, an email from her book club about their May selection. I searched the sent folder for Stellan's name. 74 results spanning 15 years. Birthday cards, Thanksgiving logistics, nothing unusual. Then I remembered something Iris used to do, send emails to herself when she wanted to remember things. Shopping lists, medical questions for her oncologist. I clicked on the Sent to Self folder. One email, dated March 14th, 2020. Subject line, if you're reading this. My hand hovered over the mouse for 3 seconds. Murphy didn't move. I clicked. Hi honey, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're searching for something. I need you to know what I didn't tell you when I was alive because you had the Walker case the next morning, and I couldn't put this weight on you then. March 14th, 2020, 6 weeks before she died. The diagnosis had come. March 1st, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, metastasized 6 to 8 weeks. She'd spent those weeks leaving breadcrumbs for a future she wouldn't see. I kept reading. Last Christmas, Mother mentioned her pearls were missing from the bedroom safe, the ones grandmother left her worth about $8,000. After dinner, I checked the safe. Stellan had been alone in our room for 11 minutes before we ate. The pearls were gone. When I confronted him privately the next day, he apologized. But honey, his eyes didn't look ashamed. They looked calculating, like he was measuring how much I knew versus how much I could prove. I asked him directly, "Did you take Mother's pearls?" He said no, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He said maybe someone had broken in months ago and we'd never noticed. He said Mother was getting old and probably misplaced them herself. I didn't tell you because you had the Walker infant case scheduled for the next morning, that complex pulmonary valve repair that kept you up 3 nights preparing. You don't sleep when something like this is on your mind, and that baby needed you sharp. But I'm leaving this record. Should anything ever happen, should you ever need to understand who Stellan became versus who we hoped he'd be, please remember this moment. Remember that when I looked in his eyes, I didn't see my nephew. I didn't see the boy you raised alone after his mother left. I saw someone who'd learned to lie so smoothly he almost believed himself. I've seen a lot of people lie in 30 years of nursing. Parents who insisted they didn't shake the baby. Teenagers who swore they weren't using. But Stellan's lie was different. It was practiced. Professional. Eleanor at Norton Rose Fulbright knows. I told her the day she joined the firm. She's keeping records. I love you. I read it 4 times. Placed my hand flat on the screen where that single letter sat. Iris, you carried this alone so I could sleep the night before saving a child. I can't even remember the name of now, but you remembered everything. The Walker case. February 2019. A 7-month-old with transposition of the great arteries. The surgery had gone perfectly. I'd never thought about it again because that's what you did. You fixed what was broken and moved on. But Iris had thought about it, had carried the weight of Stellan's calculating eyes and her mother's missing pearls through 3 nights of watching me prepare, had chosen my sleep over her peace of mind, had documented it anyway in case I ever needed to know. Murphy shifted beside me, placing his chin on my shoe. I looked at the date again. March 14th, 2020. 6 weeks before she died on April 23rd, she'd known she was dying, known she had maybe 2 months, and she'd spent some of that precious time writing this email protecting me from knowledge I'd need after she was gone. But the last line stopped me cold. Eleanor at Norton Rose Fulbright knows. I told her the day she joined the firm. I didn't know anyone named Eleanor. I'd never worked with Norton Rose Fulbright. My estate attorney was Margaret Chen, had been for 20 years, handling everything from the house deed to my medical practice incorporation. But Iris had told this woman about the pearls the day she joined the firm, which meant Iris had been building something, some kind of protection or documentation or plan. And she'd trusted this stranger, this Eleanor, with information she'd hidden from me. I sat with my hand pressed against the computer screen for 17 minutes. Murphy didn't move. The afternoon light shifted across the desk, illuminating the words, Eleanor at Norton Rose Fulbright knows, in a diagonal stripe of September sun. Iris's words stayed frozen in 12-point Arial, written 6 weeks before she died, waiting for this exact moment when I'd finally need them. I needed to find out who Eleanor was. I needed to know why my wife had been whispering secrets to an estate attorney I'd never met. And I needed to understand what Iris had been protecting me from all this time. Eleanor would have to wait. I needed to start with someone I knew. I pulled out the file drawer where Iris had kept household documents, mortgage papers, insurance policies, and the business card of Margaret Chen, the estate attorney, who'd done our wills 12 years ago and updated them after Iris's diagnosis. The card was cream-colored embossed, Norton Rose Fulbright. Same firm Iris had mentioned. I dialed at 4:12 p.m. Thursday. Norton Rose Fulbright, how may I direct your call? Margaret Chen, please. Ms. Chen retired 18 months ago and referred all her estate clients to one of our partners, Kezia Whitfield. Would you like her direct line? Kezia, not Eleanor, but Norton Rose Fulbright, the same firm. Yes. I dialed immediately. 3 rings. Kezia Whitfield. This is Dr. Virgil Hampton. I'm trying to reach someone my late wife mentioned. 3 seconds of silence. Dr. Hampton, I've been hoping you would call. Not surprise, not confusion, hoping. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock? Yes, but I need to know. Tomorrow. There's a lot to discuss, and I'd rather do it in person. Before I could respond, she added quietly, I'm glad you finally called. The line went dead. Friday morning at 9:17 a.m. I stood on the 32nd floor of Norton Rose Fulbright's downtown Houston office. Glass and steel. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Ship Channel and River Oaks. I'd lived in Houston for 40 years and had never once set foot in this building. The receptionist walked me to a corner office. Brass nameplate, Kezia Whitfield, partner. She stood when I entered, 30 years old. Professional dark gray suit, thin pearl necklace. Dark eyes that studied me in a way that felt personal, not professional, like she was comparing me to a memory. The office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking River Oaks, neat legal folders on the desk, and on the credenza behind her, a small lavender plant in a terracotta pot. Iris's favorite herb. She slid a glass of water across the desk before I sat. The gesture felt rehearsed. "Dr. Hampton," she said, voice steady. "I haven't seen you since I was 4 years old, but I remember your voice." I froze halfway into the chair. I'm sorry, I don't remember." She raised one hand, gently. Later. That's a longer conversation, and it's not why you're here right now. What I need to know first is what brought you to look for Margaret. Tell me what's happened." 4 years old. If she was 30 now, that would have been 1995, maybe 1996. How many 4-year-olds had I treated in those years? Dozens. How many would remember my voice 3 decades later? "The lavender," I said instead of answering. That was Iris's favorite. Kezia's expression softened slightly. "I know. She told me. She also told me that one day you'd need help, and when that day came, you'd be too methodical to ask for it directly. You'd start by looking for answers in old files. You'd call, and I should be ready." She folded her hands on the desk. "So I've been ready for 5 years, Dr. Hampton. Since the day Iris died, and I knew the protection she'd built wouldn't be needed until you finally understood what your son was." Protection she'd built. What your son was. "Tell me," Kezia said quietly. "Tell me what happened." I told her. Tuesday's phone call demanding I cancel the infant's surgery. The restraining order Wednesday morning. The basement filing cabinet revealing years of transfers. Iris's handwritten slip about the pearls. The screen share accident exposing Breyer and her mother's conservatorship conspiracy. The court-appointed evaluator scheduled for next Wednesday. Yesterday, Northern Trust, the forged loan $750,000 signed in my name while I was in surgery. And finally, Iris's email. The one she'd sent herself 6 weeks before dying. The one that mentioned Eleanor at Norton Rose Fulbright. "Eleanor," I said, "not Kezia. I thought I was looking for someone named Eleanor." Kezia smiled slightly. "Now, Eleanor was my middle name when Iris knew me. I go by Kezia now, first name professionally. But to Iris, I was always Eleanor. She's the one who suggested I use my first name when I made partner. Said it sounded stronger for a courtroom." She pulled a folder from her desk drawer. Thick. Pre-prepared. "Later," she said again, that same gentle deflection. "Right now we focus on the problem in front of us. The restraining order, the conservatorship petition, the forgery." She opened the folder. But Dr. Hampton, you should know Iris didn't just document things. She built protections, legal structures designed specifically for this scenario. Trusts, designations, contingencies." She looked up at me. She knew this was coming. Maybe not the details. But she knew Stellan would eventually try to take everything. And she made sure that when he did, you'd have weapons he didn't know existed. I sat across from Kezia Whitfield in her corner office with the lavender plant and the River Oaks view, trying to remember a 4-year-old girl from 1995, whose face I'd apparently known well enough for her to recognize my voice 29 years later. She'd said later, deflecting the personal question, with the same protective firmness Iris used to use when she wanted me focused on surgery, not family drama. But the lavender plant wasn't coincidence, and neither was the way she'd been waiting for my call. The weapons question would get answered now. I started to tell Kezia everything the Thursday phone call, demanding I cancel surgery, the restraining order Friday morning, the transfers I'd calculated, the forged loan Roxanne found yesterday. But she raised one hand gently and said, "Wait. Before you continue, I need to show you something." She walked to a filing cabinet behind her desk. Not the main one, a smaller locked cabinet in the corner. She pulled out a thick accordion folder, the kind that holds years of documents. The label in what I now recognized as Iris's handwriting, Hampton Family Trust, established 2010. She set it on the desk between us. 47 pages of legal documentation, tabs color-coded, post-it notes in margins. I stared at it. I didn't remember this. Kezia sat back down, flipped to the first page and said quietly, "Dr. Hampton, you didn't establish this trust. Iris did. 14 years ago in August 2010. I was a junior associate fresh out of University of Texas Law School, and Margaret Chen assigned me to draft it. This was my first major estate document. My mind raced. 2010. Stellan would have been 24, not yet married to Breyer, still working entry-level sales jobs, before Sawyer, before Kai, before any of the money requests I documented in my basement. "I don't understand," I said. "Why would Iris—" "She had an instinct," Kezia said. "That's what she told Margaret. She said she couldn't prove anything specific, but she wanted to protect certain assets. Not from you for you. She wanted a legal barrier that couldn't be undone even by you, even if you felt guilty or pressured later." She turned the pages showing me highlighted sections. First, the Cape Cod cottage in Provincetown. "You purchased it in 1992, yes. Yes, before Stellan was born. Iris loved that house. She'd appraised at $2.5 million in 2010, ring-fenced into this irrevocable trust." She flipped to another tab. "Second 50% of your retirement assets from the Texas Children's faculty practice. Approximately $3 million in 2010. With market appreciation over 14 years, likely worth significantly more now." Another tab. "Third Methodist Foundation Charitable Gift Fund, $500,000 established in Iris's name." She looked up at me. "Total assets protected in 2010, approximately $6 million. Today, with appreciation, likely $8 to $9 million. I sat motionless. 14 years ago, before Stellan married Breyer, before Sawyer and Kai were born, before the first loan request or the first missed repayment, Iris had seen something I'd refused to see." "The trustees," Kezia continued, "are myself and an independent co-trustee at Northern Trust, a professional fiduciary with no family connections. Primary beneficiary is you, Dr. Hampton. Secondary beneficiaries are any blood-related grandchildren under age 18 at time of distribution." She turned to a page with Iris's signature at the bottom. A section was highlighted in yellow. Kezia read it aloud. "Stories Tanino. Stellan Hampton is expressly excluded from any beneficiary interest, current or future, under this irrevocable trust." I sat still for 30 seconds. The words on the page didn't change. Excluded, expressly, forever. "She knew," I said finally. "In 2010. She already knew. She had an instinct," Kezia repeated. "She told Margaret, and Margaret told me when I was drafting this that she'd seen small things. Nothing provable. The way Stellan talked about money. The way he reacted when told no. The way he'd borrow $20 and never mention it again, like the debt had evaporated the moment the cash changed hands." Kezia closed the folder. She said she hoped she was wrong. But if she was right, she wanted you protected. "The trust is irrevocable, Dr. Hampton. You can't dissolve it. You can't add Stellan to it. Even if you wanted to, even if he convinced you he'd changed, even if you felt guilty about excluding your own son, you can't undo what Iris built." I looked down at my hands resting on Kezia's desk. They were shaking. The same tremor I'd felt in the OR locker room 48 hours ago, when Stellan's call first came through. But this time it wasn't from shock or fear. It was from understanding. "Iris, you built a fortress. I didn't know I'd need appointed a guardian I didn't know existed, and protected me from a future you couldn't prove would happen, but knew in your bones was coming. The conservatorship petition," I said, my voice rough. "If they get control of me, can they access—" "No. Kezia said firmly. The trust is a separate legal entity. The assets aren't in your name anymore. They haven't been since 2010. A conservator would have no legal standing to touch them. That's the point of an irrevocable trust. It's beyond the reach of creditors' lawsuits and, yes, conservatorship orders. She leaned forward slightly. Dr. Hampton, even if Stellan succeeds with the conservatorship, even if a court grants him legal authority over your medical decisions and your bank accounts and your house, he can't touch the Cape Cod cottage. He can't touch the retirement assets in this trust. He can't touch the charitable fund. How much I asked, of my total assets did she protect? In 2010, approximately 40% of your total net worth. Today, with the way the trust assets have appreciated and the fact that you've continued transferring liquid cash to Stellan over the years, probably closer to 55 or 60%. I looked at the folder with Iris's handwriting on the label. 2010. Stellan was 24. I'd still believed he'd grow out of whatever phase he was in. Still believed the missed repayments were honest mistakes, cash flow problems, the kind of thing young people struggled with. Iris had known better. And she'd brought a 24-year-old law student, Kezia, fresh out of University of Texas, drafting her first major estate document, into a secret plan to save me from my own son. Everything made sense now. The lavender plant, the waiting for my call, the folder already prepared. This had been Iris's design all along. Why you? I asked. Why did she appoint you as trustee when you were, 16 years old in 2010? Kezia's expression softened. That, she said quietly, is the longer conversation I promised. The one about why I remember your voice from when I was 4. She glanced at the clock on her desk. 9:55 a.m. But first we need to talk about what happens next. The conservatorship hearing, the restraining order, the forgery. Because the trust protects your assets, Dr. Hampton, but it doesn't protect your freedom or your medical license. And those are what Stellan's really trying to take. Protecting my freedom meant offense, not defense. Kezia reached into her desk drawer and pulled out 4 red folders, each one labeled with a tab, in her precise handwriting. POA revocation, HPD report, medical board court motion, and set them in a neat row between us, like surgical instruments laid out before an operation. Thursday morning next week, she said. September 26th, 9 o'clock. You'll come to this office with a notary present and sign all 4 documents. She opened the first folder. POA revocation. Notarized termination of Stellan's power of attorney over your accounts and medical decisions. This nullifies the 2020 pandemic arrangement. Second folder. Houston Police Department Financial Crimes Unit report for the forged equity loan. Includes Roxanne's forensic signature analysis. Cites Texas Penal Code 32.55 third-degree felony elder abuse. The DA's office will decide whether to prosecute, but the report goes on Stellan's record either way. Third folder. Texas Medical Board preemptive complaint, documenting attempts to interfere with your medical licensure and professional reputation. This creates a paper trail showing you're mentally competent and actively practicing. Fourth folder. Motion to dismiss the conservatorship petition pending at Harris County 234th Civil Court, plus emergency counter-restraining order against false claims of incapacity. She looked up at me. I'll file them simultaneously via electronic portal. They'll all be stamped and served within 90 minutes. Court Police Medical Board all at once. Kezia laid out the folders like a surgeon laying out instruments, each one designed for a specific incision, a specific repair, and when used in sequence, they'd reconstruct what had been damaged. This isn't sequential defense, Dr. Hampton. This is coordinated legal warfare. I stared at the 4 folders. How long? I asked. Have you had these prepared? Since Tuesday, she said. The day after you found Iris's email. I knew you'd call. I knew what you'd need. She closed the folders and restacked them. One more question before you leave. Who should replace Stellan as primary beneficiary in your personal will, the assets outside the irrevocable trust? I thought immediately of my niece. Lorraine's daughter. The marine biologist who called every few weeks just to talk, who'd driven to Houston when Iris died, and stayed for 2 weeks, making sure I ate, who sent me articles about ocean conservation she thought I'd find interesting, even though I'd never expressed any interest in marine biology. Adrienne Caldwell, I said. My sister's daughter. She's a marine biologist in Galveston. Kezia made a note. I'll draft the amendment this weekend. You'll sign it Thursday along with the others. As I stood to leave, Kezia slid a sealed manila envelope across the desk. 9 by 12 inches. My name written in her handwriting on the front. Sealed with red wax. Read this when you're ready, Dr. Hampton. Not today. You've learned enough for one morning. I took it, felt the weight, maybe 2 or 3 pages inside. A photograph, perhaps. I didn't ask what it contained. Something in Kezia's eyes told me it was the answer to the 4-year-old question, and I wasn't ready yet. Thursday at 9, she said as I reached the door. Don't be late. I walked out of Norton Rose Fulbright at 11:23 a.m. with 4 red folders under one arm, a sealed envelope in my other hand, and the understanding that my wife had been building a fortress I'd never seen. That night at 9:14 p.m., I sat at my West U kitchen table. 4 red folders stacked to my left. Sealed envelope face down to my right. Fresh lentil soup cooling in front of me, Murphy's head resting on my knee. I called Lorraine in Asheville. She picked up on the first ring this time, which meant she'd been waiting. Lorraine, I started. Chick, I had the biopsy Monday, brother. Her voice was steady but thin. Results come back Wednesday. The oncologist said if it's stage 1, I'm okay, 6 months of radiation, good prognosis. If it's stage 2 or higher, her voice broke. I need to be near you. You're the only one I wanted to tell. My hand tightened on Murphy's fur. 8 seconds of silence, the same length she'd given me when I told her about the conservatorship plot. Then, come Tuesday. I'll pick you up at IAH. What time does your flight land? Lorraine cried softly through the phone. I didn't. 2:37 p.m., she said finally. Southwest. I'll be there at 2. Virgil. We'll get through it, I said. Whatever the results are. The same way we got through everything else. She'd gone with me to every hospital where Iris stayed during the cancer. Slept on vinyl chairs. Brought me coffee at 4 a.m. Now I'd go with her the way siblings do when there's no one else left. After we hung up, I sat at the table until midnight. Then I carried the folders and envelope upstairs. Murphy followed. I stood at the bedroom window watching the oak tree outside, its branches shifting in the September wind. The sealed envelope sat on the nightstand, unopened. 3 in the morning came and went. I didn't sleep, just thought about instinct. Iris had it 14 years ago, seeing something in Stellan that I'd missed or refused to acknowledge. Building protections I'd never known about. Appointing a guardian I'd never met. Lorraine had it hearing my voice Tuesday night, and knowing immediately that something catastrophic had happened, telling me to go to the bank before Stellan could freeze accounts, asking about the POA without needing explanation. Even Kezia seemed to have it preparing 4 folders before I asked, knowing what I'd need before I knew I needed it, giving me an envelope with instructions to wait because she understood I wasn't ready for more truth yet. The question was whether I'd finally developed it myself, or whether I was still just following the breadcrumbs of people who loved me more than I'd loved myself. Murphy followed me upstairs at 3 a.m. and curled up on Iris's side of the bed, the side that had been empty for 5 years. I stood at the window until the oak tree's branches became visible in pre-dawn gray. Iris, I said aloud to the empty room, you had an instinct 14 years ago. I didn't. Murphy raised his head briefly, then settled back down. Thursday morning would come soon enough. 4 signatures, 4 strikes, and whatever came after. The answer would come through action, not thought. Thursday morning at 9 o'clock, I walked into Norton Rose Fulbright's 32nd floor conference room, where a notary public sat waiting with his seal and stamp book, and I understood that the next 28 minutes would divide my life into before and after. The notary was a man in his 40s named Gerald, sent by a downtown notary service Kezia hired for exactly 9 a.m. He stood when I entered professional and efficient and verified my Texas driver's license against my face, recording the details in his log with practiced precision. Kezia had laid out the 4 red folders in sequence on the conference table, each document flagged with yellow arrows at signature lines. Murphy waited at the reception desk. Kezia had insisted, "This is serious legal work, Dr. Hampton. No dogs in the signing room." I sat down. Gerald opened his stamp book. Kezia called out the first timestamp. She 907, power of attorney revocation. I signed. Gerald notarized. The document terminated Stellan's authority over all my financial and medical decisions, nullifying the pandemic arrangement we'd established in good faith 4 years ago. 914. Houston Police Department Financial Crimes Unit Report. I signed. The forgery complaint citing the $750,000 equity loan, complete with Roxanne's forensic signature analysis. Texas Penal Code 32.55. Third-degree felony elder abuse. 921. Texas Medical Board complaint. I signed. Preemptive documentation of interference with my medical licensure and professional reputation, creating a paper trail that I was mentally competent and actively practicing. 928. Motion to dismiss conservatorship petition, Harris County 234th Civil Court. I signed the final document. Emergency counter-restraining order against false claims of erratic behavior and incapacity. Gerald stamped each signature, logged each timestamp, closed his book. I'd spent 40 years making incisions with precision. One cut, one purpose, one repair, and these 4 signatures were the same, deliberate, irreversible, designed to heal by removing what had gone malignant. Kezia looked at me across the conference table. Dr. Hampton, these documents are now irrevocable. Once I file them, there's no calling them back. Are you certain? 28 minutes. I just declared war on my own son using the legal system he'd tried to weaponize against me. I'm certain. At 9:31 a.m. Kezia opened her laptop and filed all 4 documents simultaneously via the Texas e-filing portal. Courts Police Department Medical Board. The system generated confirmation numbers in real time. She turned the screen toward me. Filed and pending judicial review. Based on typical processing times, all 4 will be stamped and officially served by 11 o'clock, maybe 11:30 at the latest. 90 minutes from now. I stood to leave. Kezia walked me to the elevator, Murphy trotting beside us. At the doors, she stopped and looked at me with those dark eyes that had been waiting 5 years for this moment. Iris built the fortress, she said quietly. You just deployed it. I took the elevator down alone with Murphy, walked to my Lexus in the parking garage. At 9:47 a.m., I pulled onto I-10 West, heading toward West University. The September Houston sun was harsh through the windshield. Murphy sat in the passenger seat, where Roxanne's forensic analysis had sat 6 days ago. I thought about who to call first. Lorraine landed at IAH in 3 days Tuesday afternoon. Her biopsy results came tomorrow. I should call her, make sure she was okay, confirm the flight details. But instead, I found myself scrolling to a different number, Celeste Ashford, my former fellow at UT Southwestern Dallas. The mentee I'd trained for 15 years, starting when she was a fresh surgical resident and I was visiting faculty. I'd guided her through her first solo surgery. She'd called me for advice 100 times, complex cases, difficult patients, career decisions. We'd co-invented a surgical tool together 5 years ago, a modified valve retractor that reduced operation time by 20%. The patent was pending, royalties would be split. She'd understand what it cost to fight your own family in court. She'd been through her own battles with the difficult divorce custody issues. She'd know what this felt like. I wanted to tell her everything. The restraining order, the forgery, the 4 filings I'd just signed. I dialed her office at UT Southwestern Medical Center. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I could hear the familiar background hum. When she picked up, the medical center sounds I recognized from my own years there, the particular acoustic quality of a busy teaching hospital. "This is Dr. Ashford." Her voice had a quality I'd never heard before. Hesitation. Like she'd been expecting this call and dreading it. 3 seconds of silence before she continued. Virgil, I was going to call you this week." Murphy looked at me from the passenger seat, the way he used to look at Iris when she was upset. Steady, present, asking no questions, because dogs understand that sometimes silence is the only answer. "Celeste," I said, "I need to talk to you about something that's happened. My son—" "I know," she said, cutting me off. "Virgil and I know about the conservatorship petition. I received a call last week from an attorney, Norton Hall LLP. They asked me to provide a statement about your cognitive function, your surgical precision, whether I'd noticed any decline. The I-10 traffic blurred in front of me." "What did you tell them?" Another pause. Longer this time. I told them I'd think about it. Virgil, there are complications. Things about the patent, the royalty split. I need to explain, but not over the phone. Can we meet privately next week? There are things I need to discuss with you." "What things about the patent?" "Next week. Please, I'll come to Houston. We'll talk face to face." Before I could respond, she added quickly, "I will help you, Virgil. I promise. But this is complicated, and I need to be careful about—" The line went dead, not disconnected by accident, ended deliberately. I sat in traffic on I-10 West with Murphy beside me and Celeste's hesitation echoing in my ears. Something in that 3-second pause before she'd said my name told me this conversation hadn't gone the way I'd planned. Something about the patent. Norton Hall LLP, the same firm behind the conservatorship. Complications she couldn't discuss over the phone. The 4 documents were filed. 90 minutes until official service. But Celeste's voice, the hesitation, the abrupt hang-up, the careful phrasing about needing to be careful, told me that whatever fortress Iris had built there were still vulnerabilities I hadn't seen yet. The complications would have to wait for explanation. I told Celeste everything in the methodical way I used to present surgical cases to her during rounds, the restraining order, the basement discovery, Iris's email about the pearls, the forged loan, the iMessage screen share leak, and this morning's 4 filings I'd signed 2 hours ago. Celeste Ashford, 47 and chief of pediatric cardiology at UT Southwestern Dallas, had been my mentee for 15 years. I'd written the recommendation that made her chief, taught her every technique she used in the OR, trusted her the way you trust someone who's saved lives beside you. Normally, she interrupted with questions after 30 seconds. She was a fast processor, thought 3 steps ahead, made split-second decisions. But this time, 3 seconds of silence. 3 seconds, the same length of time a heart can pause between beats before the monitor alarms, before you start wondering if it's going to start again. Then, Virgil, Jesus, I'll help you. Of course I'll help you. Another pause. But can we meet privately next week, not phone, face to face? There are things I need to discuss with you. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Harsh Houston sun through the windshield. I-10 traffic building toward lunch hour. Murphy's steady breathing from the passenger seat. Things about what? The background noise from UT Southwestern faded. She'd moved to a quieter room, closed a door, on about the situation and some other professional matters we should address in person. Celeste, if you know something about the conservatorship, it's not about the conservatorship. Not directly. Her voice tightened. Virgil, it's about the patent. The cardiac monitoring device we co-developed 8 years ago. The one still generating royalties. There are complications I need to explain to you in person. Legal complications. My mind raced. The patent had been in arbitration for months over licensing terms. Standard industry stuff. The royalties came in quarterly split 50-50. What complications, Celeste? Just tell me now. I can't discuss it over the phone. Why not? Because she stopped. Started again. Next week, I'll fly to Houston. We'll sit down properly. Explain what you're talking in circles. 5 seconds of silence, then quickly. I have to go. Patient consult in 5 minutes. I'm sorry, Virgil. I really am. I'll call you this weekend to schedule. I promise I'll help you. Click. The line went dead. I held the phone for 3 seconds before setting it down. Murphy raised his head and looked at me through the rearview mirror, the same steady gaze Iris used to give me when she knew I was missing something. 15 years I'd trained her. Taught her to make clean incisions, to trust her instincts, to tell the truth even when it cost her. And she couldn't tell me the truth over the phone. I exited I-10 at Shepherd and pulled into a CVS parking lot because my hands were shaking. Murphy shifted in the passenger seat watching me. I said aloud, "Why is the patent important now? We co-invented that device 8 years ago. What legal complications could there possibly be?" But I already knew the answer was something I wasn't going to like. The same way I'd known about the pearls before reading Iris's email. The same way I'd known about the conservatorship before seeing the iMessage leak. I just hadn't wanted to see it yet. Celeste's 3-second silence, her insistence on meeting face-to-face, her refusal to explain over the phone, the way her voice had tightened when she mentioned the patent. I pulled out my phone and searched Celeste and patent in my email. Most recent March. A forwarded document from our patent attorney about arbitration. Routine. February. Royalty distribution question. January. Licensing inquiry from a European company. Nothing that would explain legal complications. My phone buzzed. Kezia, all 4 documents stamped and officially served as of 11:17 a.m. POA revoked HPD report. Filed medical board notified court motion entered. You're officially on offense now. 11:17, 23 minutes ago. Stella had been served. Breyer had been served. Norton Hall LLP had been notified their conservatorship petition was being challenged. The legal warfare was live, but Celeste's call had shifted something. Norton Hall LLP, the firm behind the conservatorship. The firm that had called Celeste last week, asking for a statement about my cognitive function. The firm she'd said she was thinking about whether to help. And now, legal complications, with a patent that had been stable for 8 years. I looked at Murphy. "She's involved," I said aloud. "Isn't she, Celeste? She's part of this somehow." Murphy tilted his head slightly. I thought about the timeline. The conservatorship petition was filed before the restraining order. At least 2 weeks ago, maybe more. Long enough for Norton Hall LLP to contact Celeste. Long enough for her to consider providing a statement. Long enough for legal complications to develop with the patent. I put the car in reverse and pulled back onto Shepherd, heading south toward West University. Murphy settled back into the passenger seat. I had 3 days until Lorraine arrived. Her biopsy results came tomorrow. I needed to focus on that, on being there for my sister. But Celeste's voice kept echoing. The tightness, the evasion, the refusal to explain. The same tone I'd heard in Stellan's voice when Iris confronted him about the pearls. Calculating, measuring how much I knew versus how much could be proven. And I realized with absolute clarity whatever Celeste needed to tell me face to face, wasn't going to be help. It was going to be another betrayal. The church fellowship hall smelled like coffee and fundraising optimism. I stood near the dessert table Friday evening, forcing smiles at familiar faces, while my mind replayed yesterday's discovery. Celeste had known about the conservatorship filing and said nothing. Dr. Hampton. A woman in her late 30s approached, clutching a paper plate. Petite, with sharp green eyes behind frameless glasses and auburn hair pulled into a practical ponytail, she wore a navy blazer that screamed, "Legal professional." "I'm Gail Townsend. I worked as a paralegal at Norton Hall, LLP. My chest tightened. "The firm that filed the conservatorship petition?" "Yes." She glanced over her shoulder. "I need to tell you something. I quit 2 days ago because I couldn't stomach what they're doing to you." Breyer materialized beside me, protective and alert. Gail spoke quickly, voice low. "The petition. It wasn't your mother-in-law's idea. Norton Hall approached Adrienne Hargrove 6 weeks ago. They initiated everything. Why would a law firm initiate a conservatorship? Because someone's paying them." Gail set down her untouched plate. "I saw the invoices. A third party is funding the entire case, retainer, court fees, expert witnesses, everything. Adrienne's not spending a dime." The room tilted slightly. "Who's paying?" "I don't know. The invoices just say client matter 2024-0847 third-party arrangement. But here's what I do know. Bradford Moss, the senior partner handling your case, personally met with this mystery client 3 times. He assigned 4 associates to research Texas conservatorship law and hospital asset seizures. Asset seizures, specifically, how a conservator could liquidate or redirect valuable business holdings." Gail's expression hardened. "Dr. Hampton, they're not trying to protect you. They're trying to take something from you. My father's research. The only thing worth taking. I brought copies." Gail pulled a flash drive from her blazer pocket. "Billing records, internal emails, research memos. Everything I could grab before I resigned. It's not admissible in court attorney-client privilege, but it might help you understand what you're facing." I took the drive with shaking hands. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I became a paralegal to help people, not to help rich sociopaths destroy them." She squeezed my arm briefly. "Be careful, Dr. Hampton. Norton Hall doesn't lose. Whatever they're after, they've planned this meticulously." She disappeared into the crowd before I could respond. Breyer and I sat in my Lexus in the parking lot 20 minutes later. Her laptop balanced on her knees as she opened Gail's files. "Jesus," she whispered, scrolling through billing records. "They've logged 247 hours on your case already. At Norton Hall's rates, that's easily $180,000 in fees. For a conservatorship that supposedly protects me. It gets worse." She clicked on a research memo. "They have a strategy document titled Post-Appointment Asset Management. It specifically mentions securing research materials and intellectual property of significant commercial value. They knew about Dad's Alzheimer's research. The question was, who told them?" "Search for Bradford Moss," I said suddenly. "Gail mentioned he's the senior partner. I want to know who he is." Breyer pulled up Norton Hall's website. The partner directory showed a silver-haired man in his early 60s, Yale Law School, former federal prosecutor chair of the firm's fiduciary litigation practice. Then she clicked on his bio page. Under personal faction, below mentions of his country club memberships and board positions, one line made my blood stop. "Bradford Moss resides in River Oaks with his wife Celeste Hargrove Moss, a healthcare consultant." I stared at the words, my brain refusing to process them. "How Celeste is married to the attorney handling your conservatorship case," Breyer said slowly. "She told me her husband was a lawyer." My voice sounded distant. "She said he traveled for work, that he'd be interested in meeting me." Virgil. He was at our house 6 months ago. The memory surfaced with sickening clarity. A dinner party Adrian hosted. Celeste brought him. Bradford. He asked about my practice, about the girls, about my plans for Memorial Herman's future. I thought he was just making conversation. Briar's face had gone pale. He was gathering intelligence. Celeste has been in our home dozens of times. She knows about Dad's research. I mentioned it once months ago, when she asked why I looked exhausted. I told her I was organizing his papers, that he'd been working on something important before he died, and she told her husband, who saw an opportunity. The pieces assembled themselves with brutal efficiency. Adrian's been hostile toward me since Charlotte died, publicly questioning my competence. Perfect target for a conservatorship. And if Bradford's firm gets appointed as conservator, they control everything I own, including Dad's research materials, which they can then sell or license to pharmaceutical companies. Briar finished. Gale's files mentioned commercial value. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. Bradford Moss had spent 6 months at our dinner table, shaking my hand, asking about my daughters, and the entire time he'd been preparing to declare me incompetent and steal the one thing that could save our future. Pattern interrupt, one-line break after make conversation section. CTA, placed at 600 words. I'm about to show you how deep this conspiracy goes, and trust me, you won't believe who else is involved. But first, drop a comment. What would you do if you discovered your friend's husband was orchestrating your legal destruction? Your answers keep me going. Quick note, I'm not a lawyer. This is just my story. Pattern interrupt, 2-line break, before Bradford Moss revelation section. The glow of my study monitors turned my hands blue as I typed Celeste Ashford USPTO into the patent database at 8:47 p.m. Briar had gone upstairs. Murphy slept in his bed near the fireplace. The house felt too quiet. The search returned one result. Application 18/2024/094857. Method and apparatus for minimally invasive pediatric cardiac valve repair. Inventor Celeste Marie Ashford, M.D. Co-inventor claim filed against existing patent US 9847332 held by Virgil R. Hampton, M.D. I read it twice. Filed March 14, 2024. 6 months ago. 6 months before Adrian filed the conservatorship petition. 6 months before Norton Hall LLP entered my life. The claim detailed Celeste's alleged contributions during our 15 years of collaboration. Substantial intellectual input on valve architecture, surgical approach refinement, and clinical protocol development. She sought co-inventor status and equitable division of all past and future royalties. The arbitration demand, $4.8 million. I'd trained her, mentored her through her fellowship, watched her grow from a nervous resident into one of the finest pediatric cardiac surgeons I'd ever worked with. We'd published together, operated together, presented at conferences together, and for 6 months while she smiled at me across the OR table, she'd been filing legal documents to take half of everything my father and I had built. I opened LinkedIn, hands moving automatically. Celeste's profile appeared first. Pediatric Cardiac Surgeon, Memorial Hermann Medical Center. Married to Bradford Moss. There it was, public information I'd somehow never noticed. Below her professional summary, a relationship status last updated in 2018, married to Bradford Moss, partner at Norton Hall LLP. I clicked through to his profile. Bradford Moss, J.D. Senior Partner, Norton Hall LLP. Practice areas: elder law, conservatorship, litigation, fiduciary disputes, estate planning. Yale Law School, 1987. 63 connections. 12 endorsements for conservatorship law. A recommendation from a probate judge praising his meticulous approach to protecting vulnerable clients. Vulnerable clients, The profile picture showed him at a charity gala, Celeste beside him in a navy gown. I recognized the venue, Memorial Herman's annual fundraiser. Last year. I'd been there 20 feet away bidding on auction items while the man planning to declare me incompetent smiled for cameras. How many dinner invitations had I extended to them, Bradford and Celeste, laughing in my kitchen, while the patent claim sat in his briefcase? I pulled up my email client and ran a metadata search * sender Celeste at memorialherman.org recipient Stellan OR recipient Breyer *. The results loaded slowly. 47 emails, 6 months of correspondence. I opened the first sent March 15th one day after Celeste filed her patent claim. From Celeste Ashford to Stellan Hampton. Subject: following up coffee chat. Stellan, so wonderful catching up yesterday. I meant what I said about wanting to support you through this difficult time. Your father's behavior has everyone at the hospital concerned. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. Also, I'd love to hear more about your sustainability consulting practice. Lunch next week, see. The cursor blinked. I scrolled to the next email. March 22nd. Stellan, thank you for confiding in me about your father's erratic decisions. You're being incredibly brave. April 3rd. I've been thinking about our conversation. There are legal options to protect someone who's becoming a danger to himself. April 18th. My husband specializes in exactly these situations. Would you be open to a confidential consultation? May 2nd, Stellan. I know this is hard, but protecting your father is the loving choice. I stopped reading. 43 more emails remained. Not one copied to me. Not one forwarded. 6 months of private conversations between my daughter and the woman I'd mentored since she was 29 years old. The second search * sender Celeste at memorialherman.org recipient Breyer *. 6 emails starting in July. From Celeste Ashford to Breyer Hampton. Subject: your dad. Breyer, Stellan mentioned you're worried about your father's recent behavior. I work with him daily. I see things you might not. If you want an honest assessment from a colleague, I'm happy to talk. This stays between us. C. My younger daughter, 23 years old. Celeste had recruited her too. I sat back, the study chair creaking. 15 years. I'd written recommendation letters for Celeste's fellowship applications. Nominated her for the Memorial Herman Teaching Award. Invited her into my home for Christmas dinners when her own family lived in California. Taught her every technique I knew, and she'd used my daughters to build a conservatorship case, while simultaneously claiming half my life's work. Murphy's weight shifted. He'd never left his bed unprompted in 4 years. But tonight, he stood crossed the 10 feet of hardwood floor between his bed and my desk, and rested his chin on my left knee. His brown eyes looked up at me, patient and steady. Good boy, I whispered. Stay. He didn't move. I've performed pediatric cardiac surgery for 30 years. 4 children died on my table, 3 during emergency procedures, 1 from complications I couldn't prevent. I attended each funeral, stood beside devastated parents, and said the words surgeons are trained to say. Drove home afterward and returned to work the next morning. I never cried, not once. Grief belonged to families. I was the professional who had done everything possible and failed. I'd held Charlotte's hand as the cancer ate through her lungs, watched her weight drop from 128 pounds to 89. Administered morphine when the pain became unbearable. Signed the DNR order. Sat beside her hospital bed for 36 hours until her breathing stopped. I never cried. She needed me strong. I'd buried my father 3 months ago, the man who'd taught me everything about medicine and honor and perseverance. Stood at his graveside and delivered the eulogy. Sorted through 40 years of his research alone in his office, reading his notes about the Alzheimer's treatment, that could save millions. I never cried. He would have called it indulgent. Tonight, staring at 47 emails my daughter sent to the woman I'd mentored for 15 years. Emails plotting to take my invention. My assets, my freedom, one tear fell. Murphy didn't move his chin from my knee. I wiped my face and sat still for another minute, Murphy's warmth against my leg, the only solid thing in the room. Then I stood. I woke at 6:42 a.m. without an alarm, the same minute Iris's heart hit 184 beats per minute 5 years ago. Murphy lifted his head from the dog bed, watching me cross to the closet. The marble keepsake box sat on the top shelf behind winter sweaters I never wore. White Italian marble, cool and smooth, purchased the week after the funeral because I couldn't leave her belongings in a cardboard hospital bag. Inside, wedding ring, size 6, white gold, with 3 small diamonds. Reading glasses, tortoiseshell frames, with a smudge on the left lens I'd never cleaned. And her Apple Watch Series 4 rose gold screen, dark. I'd charged it once after she died, saw the health data, and couldn't look again. The battery had been dead for 5 years. But technology changed. Cloud storage, data persistence. I carried the watch downstairs to my study and found an old charging cable in the desk drawer. The magnetic connector clicked into place. Nothing happened for 30 seconds. Murphy sat beside my chair, tail still. Then the screen glowed white with the Apple logo. "Come on," I whispered. "Just once." The setup screen appeared, "Connect to Wi-Fi." I selected our home network. The watch vibrated softly, connecting to iCloud, retrieving backup data, health data restored. 5 years. The battery can't possibly hold a charge for more than a few minutes, but it only needed to show me one day. I opened the health app and scrolled to April 23rd, 2020. The timeline loaded in segments: heart rate activity, fall detection, emergency calls. 6:42 a.m. heart rate spike from 68 beats per minute to 184 beats per minute over 14 seconds. Irregular rhythm alert. High heart rate alert. 6:42 a.m. Significant elevation change detected. Possible fall. 6:43 a.m. fall detected. Hard fall identified. Emergency SOS initiating in 60 seconds. Tap cancel to stop countdown. 6:43 a.m. emergency SOS. Cancelled. I stared at the word. Cancelled. The watch's automatic fall detection had triggered. The 60-second countdown had started, and someone had tapped the screen to cancel it. I scrolled further. 7:06 a.m. outside emergency call placed to 911 from landline household phone log cross-reference. 7:14 a.m. paramedic arrival timestamp from Houston Fire Department EMS incident report. 22 minutes between the fall and the 911 call. 22 minutes while Iris lay on the kitchen floor, heart in ventricular fibrillation, brain cells dying from oxygen deprivation. Stellan had been the only person home that morning. Briar was at her college apartment. I'd been at the hospital finishing a 6-hour surgery on a 9-year-old with tetralogy of Fallot. Stellan called me at 7:18 a.m., voice shaking. "Dad, it's Mom. The paramedics are here. They're working on her, but she's Dad. I think she's gone." I'd asked her what happened. I was upstairs getting ready for work. I heard a crash and came down and she was on the floor. I called 911 right away, Dad. I swear I called right away. Right away. The word "cancelled" glowed in red beneath emergency SOS initiated. Murphy's tail stopped wagging. He sat, waited. I pulled open the bottom desk drawer and found the folder I'd kept for 5 years: paramedic incident report, autopsy findings, death certificate. I'd read them each once, filed them, and never looked again. The incident report showed arrival timestamp 07:14, patient asystole, estimated downtime 25 to 30 minutes, based on body temperature and lividity patterns. The lead paramedic had noted in the margin I'd forgotten this detail, a single handwritten line: cardiac event, with immediate 911 call equals 70 to 80% survival rate per AHA guidelines. Delay beyond 5 minutes significantly reduces viability. 70 to 80%. If Stellan had let the watch complete its automatic emergency call at 6:43 a.m., paramedics would have arrived by 6:51. Iris would have had a 70 to 80% chance of survival. Instead, someone tapped cancel, then waited 22 minutes. I set down the report and picked up the watch again, scrolling through the timeline once more. The data was precise medical grade, the kind of documentation I trusted in the OR heart rate 184. Fall detected 0642. Emergency SOS canceled 0643. Outside 911 call 0706. Stellan inherited $340,000 from Iris's life insurance policy. She'd used $80,000 as a down payment on her Montrose condo 3 months later. The rest went into investments. I'd thought at the time that she was being financially responsible moving forward with her life. 26 years old, grieving her mother, making practical decisions. Now I knew she'd been planning. The conservatorship petition, the emails with Celeste, the coordination with Bradford Moss. All of it required funding attorney retainers, expert witness fees, court costs. Gail's flash drive had shown $180,000 in legal fees paid by a third-party arrangement. Stellan had $260,000 remaining from Iris's death. I placed the Apple Watch on the desk very slowly, screen still glowing with the canceled emergency call timestamp. Murphy's breathing was the only sound in the study. The conservatorship wasn't about protecting me. The patent claim wasn't about Celeste's contributions. The conspiracy wasn't even about my father's Alzheimer's research. It was about finishing what Stellan had started 5 years ago, taking everything I had the way she'd taken Iris. She'd tapped cancel on the watch, walked upstairs, waited 22 minutes while her mother's heart stopped, then called 911 and cried into the phone about finding her collapsed. I'd held Stellan at the funeral, told her it wasn't her fault, that cardiac events were unpredictable, that she'd done everything she could. I don't know why he waited 22 minutes, I said aloud to the empty room, but I was going to find out. I knew why she waited. The inheritance, the conspiracy, the years of planning that started with tapping cancel on a dying woman's emergency alert. But knowing didn't make the kitchen feel less empty at 10:47 p.m. 8 days later. Lorraine wore blue flannel pajamas and poured chamomile tea like we were 16 again, and she'd driven 3 hours from Austin just to sit in silence. She set a mug in front of me, steam rising with that faint apple scent Mom used to say smelled like comfort. You don't have to talk about it, she said quietly. I know, but when you're ready, I'm here. Murphy lay between our chairs, his weight warm against my foot. Lorraine was 51, 2 years younger than me, with the same dark hair gone silver at the temples, and the same surgical precision in the way she lived her life. Middle school principal, divorced, 12 years, no children. We'd learned early that some conversations didn't need words. She'd called this morning after I texted her about the Apple Watch. Didn't ask questions. Just said she'd be there by dinner and arrived at 6 with groceries and that particular brand of steady presence that came from sharing a childhood. The conservatorship hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Malcolm Brighton had filed a motion to dismiss based on Gail's leaked documents, but Judge Patricia Hensley would make the final call. I had the watch data, the billing records, the emails between Stellan and Celeste, evidence of conspiracy. But I didn't have a daughter anymore. Lorraine sipped her tea. The kitchen clock ticked past 10:50. Murphy's breathing stayed steady and deep. The tea's good, I said finally. Mom's recipe. I found the tin in your pantry. I forgot I had it. You forget a lot of things that matter. It wasn't a criticism. Lorraine had watched me compartmentalize for 53 years, medical school residency, marriage, parenthood, Charlotte's death. She knew how I survived, put the grief in a box, focus on what needed doing, keep moving forward. She also knew when the boxes started to break. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown Houston area code. I almost declined, then recognized the number from my recent calls list, Stellan's new cell, the one she'd gotten after blocking me on her regular line. I answered. Stellan. Dad. Her voice was thick, slurred, drunk. Dad, listen. Whitney told me I shouldn't call, but I don't know what to do. Lorraine's eyes met mine across the table. Stellan, where are you? I'm at Whitney's place. She went to bed, but I can't, a hiccup. I can't sleep. Dad, I messed up. I messed everything up. Who is Whitney? Silence. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Stellan. Another pause. Background noise traffic, maybe. Or music from another room. I'll call you back. The line went dead. I'd never heard the name Whitney in my life. Lorraine set down her mug. Whitney? I don't know. A friend, someone from work. She works remotely for a sustainability consulting firm in California. I don't know her colleagues. I scrolled through my phone contacts, searching for any Whitney. Nothing. Not a family friend, not anyone from the hospital. But she's drunk at this person's apartment at 11 p.m. on a Monday night. And this Whitney told her not to call me. Murphy lifted his head ears, rotating toward the sound of my voice. He'd heard that edge before the tone that came right before I scrubbed in for an emergency case when every decision was critical and time was running out. Lorraine pulled her own phone from her pajama pocket and typed something. There's no Whitney Hargrove in Houston. No Whitney Moss either. Why would there be? Because if Stellan is working with Adrian or Bradford, maybe there's a family connection. She kept scrolling. No Whitney at Norton Hall LLP. No Whitney on Memorial Herman's staff directory that I can find without a login. I tried calling Stellan back. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. This is Stellan. Leave a message. I hung up without speaking. She sounded guilty. Lorraine said quietly. Not angry, not defensive. Guilty. She tapped cancel on her mother's emergency alert and let her die for an inheritance. Guilt comes late. But she called you. At 11 p.m. drunk against someone's advice. That's not part of a conspiracy. Murphy's ears flattened. He'd heard that tone in Stellan's voice before, the same tremor she'd had at 13 when she'd crashed my car into a mailbox and called me crying from a 7-Eleven parking lot. Unless it is part of the plan, I said. Call me the night before the hearing. Sound vulnerable. Make me doubt the evidence. Lorraine considered this, turning her mug slowly between her palms. Do you doubt the evidence? No. Then why would she try? I didn't have an answer. Lorraine stood and refilled both our mugs from the kettle, the chamomile scent filling the kitchen again. She sat back down and looked at me with the same expression she'd worn when I told her Charlotte's cancer had metastasized, clear-eyed, steady, unflinching. Virgil, who is Whitney? I don't know. But Stellan trusts her enough to stay at her apartment, takes her advice, turns to her instead of you, even drunk and scared. So that's not a colleague. That's not a casual friend. Lorraine set down her teacup very carefully. Virgil, maybe this isn't just about money. The kitchen went quiet, except for Murphy's breathing and the hum of the refrigerator. I thought about the conservatorship petition, the patent claim, the emails with Celeste, the canceled emergency call. Everything pointed to financial theft, Stellan orchestrating a years-long plan to seize my assets, my father's research, my freedom. But Lorraine was right. Financial conspiracies didn't involve drunk phone calls at 11 p.m. from someone's apartment. They didn't involve secret advisors named Whitney who told you not to contact your father. They involved lawyers and calculated moves and cold precision. Not guilt, not fear, not whatever I'd heard in Stellan's voice when she said she'd messed everything up. I'll call Kezia in the morning, I said. She can find out who Whitney is. Lorraine nodded, watching my face. And if it's not about money, then I don't know what it's about. Kezia called at 7:23 a.m. with an address Norton Rose Fulbright 20th floor conference room, reserved until noon. She had answers. Kezia slid a thin manila dossier across the conference table at 10:14 a.m. and said 3 words. Her name's Margot. I opened the folder. The first page showed a driver's license photo woman in her early 30s, dark blonde hair, professional smile. Texas D.L. Houston address in Midtown. Margot Donovan, Kezia said. 32. Mortgage broker at Stewart Title Galleria. Met Stellan at a real estate financing seminar in August 2023. 14 months. 14 months. While I was treating Stellan's mother in hospice. While we were planning the funeral. While Celeste was filing her patent claim. They're careful, Kezia continued. No social media posts together. Separate hotel rooms when they travel for work. But hotel security footage doesn't lie, and neither do credit card receipts. I turned to the second page. Birth certificate, Harris County, Texas. Issued June 14, 2024. Child Donovan Malcolm James, mother Donovan Margot Elizabeth, father Hampton Stellan Reed. 4 months old, a boy. Nah, Stellan's listed as father, I said quietly, voluntarily. Signed the acknowledgement of paternity at the hospital. Kezia pulled out another sheet. Here's where it gets complicated. Margot sent Stellan an ultimatum 3 weeks ago. Email screenshots recovered from Stellan's deleted folder. The printout showed a message dated September 15th. Stellan, I can't keep doing this. Malcolm deserves a parent who isn't hiding him. You have 60 days to tell Breyer and file for divorce, or I'm filing for child support and putting your name on every legal document that exists. I won't let you pretend we don't exist anymore. M. 60 days from September 15th would be November 14th. 6 weeks from now. Shao has Stellan responded, not to that email, but I found this. Kezia handed me a photograph printed on standard copy paper. A baby. 4 months old, maybe 5. Lying on a blue blanket, one fist curled against his cheek. Dark hair, pale skin, eyes wide and dark. Those eyes, I'd seen them before. Not on Stellan. Stellan had Charlotte's hazel eyes, lighter amber flecked. But I'd seen these exact eyes in Iris's baby photos, the ones I'd kept in a box in my study. Dark, gray-blue, almost slate with that particular depth that photographs couldn't quite capture. Malcolm had Iris's eyes. The genetic line, my mother had the one that skipped Stellan, but appeared now in this child I'd never met. Virgil, Kezia's voice was gentle. I placed the baby photo face down on the table very slowly, like diffusing an explosive. There's more, Kezia said. More. About Breyer. I looked up. What about Breyer? She's known about the affair since June. Maybe earlier. Kezia pulled out a third section of the dossier. She consulted 2 divorce attorneys in July, Feldman and Associates in Green Family Law. Both specialize in high-asset divorce cases. Breyer consulted divorce attorneys and then did nothing. Didn't file. Didn't confront Stellan. Just waited. Kezia's expression was carefully neutral. So I asked myself, why would someone discover her spouse is having an affair, consult attorneys, and then deliberately delay filing? I didn't answer. My brain was still processing the baby photo, the eyes, the genetic line. Because, Kezia continued, under Texas community property law, assets acquired during marriage belong 50-50 to both spouses. But if those assets are in a conservatorship, frozen, controlled by a court-appointed guardian, they can't be divided in a divorce. Not until the conservatorship is resolved. You're saying... I'm saying Breyer is waiting for the conservatorship to be granted. Once Stellan becomes your legal guardian and controls your assets, Breyer files for divorce and argues she's entitled to half of everything Stellan controls, including your inheritance, your father's research, the patent royalties, all of it. They were both playing me, independently. She's not Stellan's victim, I said slowly. She's not being tricked. No. She's running her own scheme. Kezia leaned back in her chair. Stellan's trying to secure your assets to pay off Margot and keep the affair quiet. Breyer's letting Stellan do the work, then planning to take half of everything through divorce. And neither of them knows the other's plan. But as far as I can tell, Stellan thinks Breyer doesn't know about Margot. Breyer thinks Stellan doesn't know she's consulted attorneys. I looked at the dossier spread across the table. Driver's license photo, birth certificate, ultimatum email, baby picture face down, divorce attorney consultations. The conservatorship hearing is this afternoon, I said. At 1 p.m., Judge Hensley's courtroom. If it's granted Stellan gets control, then Breyer files. Probably within 72 hours. She's already drafted the petition. I found it on her laptop cloud backup. Very thorough. Claims Stellan's conservatorship activities constitute dissipation of marital assets. Requests immediate 50-50 freeze pending resolution. I stood and walked to the conference room window. 20 floors below Houston, traffic moved in precise patterns. Orderly. Predictable. Nothing about my family was orderly anymore. The 22-minute delay, I said. When Iris died, Stellan inherited her life insurance, used it as seed money for all of this, the attorneys, the patent claim, paying Celeste. Yes. And now Stellan's desperate because Margot's ultimatum expires in 6 weeks, which means either coming clean about the affair or facing public child support proceedings, which would ruin the marriage to Breyer and eliminate access to your assets through conservatorship. Stellan needs this to succeed before November 14th. But Breyer's waiting for it to succeed so she can take half. Kezia nodded. I turned back from the window and picked up the baby photo, still face down. Malcolm James Donovan, 4 months old. Iris's eyes. The baby didn't ask to be born into this. Didn't choose to be leverage in Margot's ultimatum or collateral damage in Stellan's conspiracy. I won't use the Margot information, I said quietly. The baby didn't choose this. Kezia's expression didn't change. That's your call. But Breyer's a different story. She's not protecting a child. She's exploiting your incapacity claim for financial gain. I set the photo down and closed the dossier. Stellan's affair, Breyer's divorce scheme, the conservatorship, the patent theft, the 22-minute delay that started everything. Every person in my family had been lying for months, but one of them was about to tell the truth. I didn't know which one yet, but the conservatorship hearing was in 17 hours, and someone would break. Lorraine's phone lit up at 8:12 p.m. Asheville area code, and I watched her face go completely still before she answered. This is Lorraine. She listened, didn't speak. Her eyes fixed on a point somewhere past my shoulder, expression unreadable. I set down my coffee mug and waited 4 minutes. I counted them on the kitchen clock. 4 minutes of silence while a doctor in North Carolina delivered news that would either extend my sister's life or end it. Lorraine's hand trembled slightly against the phone. Murphy lifted his head from his bed, watching. The doctor's voice was a faint murmur through the speaker, male-measured cadence, the tone physicians used when delivering results. I'd used that same tone 1,000 times. Low enough to convey gravity, steady enough to prevent panic. Lorraine closed her eyes. Yes, she said finally. Yes, I understand. Thank you, Dr. Merrick. She ended the call, and set the phone on the table very slowly, both hands flat on either side of it like she was steadying herself. Lorraine, she looked at me. Her eyes were wet. No, Virgil, it's stage 1. Treatable. 6 months of radiation starting in 2 weeks. Her voice cracked on the last word. They think it's going to be okay. Stage 1, not stage 3, not metastatic, not terminal. Treatable. You scared me to death, I said, and laughed a small broken sound that came out more like a cough. I scared myself. Lorraine wiped her face with the back of her hand. 6 months. Outpatient. They caught it early because I actually went to my mammogram appointment like a responsible adult for once in my life. 6 months, I repeated. 87% 5-year survival rate for stage 1. Dr. Merrick said I'd probably outlive him. She laughed, too sharp and wet. He's 43. I stood and crossed the kitchen. Lorraine stood too, and I pulled her into a hug tight the way Mom used to hug us when we were kids, and one of us had skinned a knee or failed a test or had our heart broken. Lorraine cried. Fully, completely the kind of crying that had been building for 3 weeks since her biopsy. Her shoulders shook against my chest. Murphy didn't wait to be called. He just came. He crossed from his bed to where we stood and pressed his full weight against both our legs, leaning hard, the way he did when he sensed distress. 85 pounds of golden retriever solidarity. Good boy, I whispered into Lorraine's hair. Good boy, Murphy. We stood like that for 2 minutes, maybe 3. The kitchen smelled like the coffee I'd made an hour ago, and the faint residue of Murphy's kibble. Outside, a car passed. Someone's sprinklers turned on with that distinctive click hiss. Lorraine pulled back, finally wiping her face with her sleeve. I want chocolate chip pancakes, she said. It's 8:30 at night. I want chocolate chip pancakes. Stress sugar. I need stress sugar. I smiled. Okay. We made them together the way we used to when we were teenagers. Lorraine measuring flour and milk, me melting butter and stirring. Murphy positioned himself strategically between the stove and the table, waiting for inevitable scraps. The batter sizzled when it hit the griddle. Lorraine dropped chocolate chips into each pancake with surgical precision, creating perfect constellations. You were always better at the chip placement, I said. It's an art form. You can't just dump them in. I dump them in, which is why your pancakes look like kindergarten art projects. The first batch finished golden brown. I flipped them onto plates. Murphy wagged his tail eyes, tracking every movement. "La new piece," I told him, breaking off corners. That's it. He took them delicately one at a time and retreated to his bed to eat them like they were sacred. Lorraine and I sat at the table with our plates. She poured too much syrup. I poured just enough. The pancakes tasted exactly like Mom's slightly crispy edges, soft centers, chocolate chips melted into dark, sweet pools. 18 days. Logan was 3 years old. 18 days was a lifetime. What are you thinking about? Lorraine asked quietly. I set down my fork, chocolate chips melting on my plate. Logan loves chocolate chip pancakes. I know. He asks for them every time I visit. Haven't seen him in 18 days. The number had been in my head since this morning, since I'd checked my calendar and counted backward to the last Sunday dinner before the conservatorship petition was filed. 3 weeks ago, I saw him every Sunday. We'd make pancakes together. He'd stand on the step stool and pour the chips in, dumps them just like I do. Gets them everywhere. Lorraine was quiet. He calls me Papa V. Couldn't say Virgil when he was learning to talk, so it became Papa V. I picked up my fork again, set it back down. 18 days. He must have forgotten my voice. Virgil. Stellan won't let him visit while the conservatorship case is pending. Says it's inappropriate to expose Logan to an unstable guardian situation. That's a quote. From the email Stellan's attorney sent Malcolm Brighton, Lorraine reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. I've missed 3 Sunday mornings, I continued. 3 batches of chocolate chip pancakes. 3 mornings of watching Daniel Tiger and reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar 47 times, because that's his current favorite, and he won't accept substitutes. You'll get those mornings back. Will I? He's 3. In 18 days, he's learned new words, started liking new foods, maybe stopped liking pancakes altogether. 3-year-olds change every week. Murphy's tail thumped against his bed. Outside, the sprinklers shut off. Stellan and Briar are stealing my money, my father's research, my freedom, I said quietly. But they already stole 18 days of Logan's childhood, and I can't get those back. Ever. Lorraine squeezed my hand. I looked at the pancakes cooling on my plate, at the chocolate chips turning solid again, at my sister who would live to see 60 and 70 and maybe 80, and I decided that the conspiracy ended tomorrow. Tomorrow came sooner than I expected. The phone rang at 9:47 p.m. on Thanksgiving Eve, Texas Children's Emergency, and I knew before I answered that everything had changed. Dr. Hampton. A woman's voice, clipped and urgent. This is Dr. Felicia Odom, ER, attending at Texas Children's. We have your grandson, Sawyer Hampton. Motor vehicle accident, suspected pulmonary contusion with cardiac tamponade requiring immediate surgical intervention. My hand tightened on the phone. How bad? Critical, but stable. Pericardial effusion estimated 200 milliliters. We need you as on-call cardiothoracic. Can you get here? 10 minutes. Who was driving? A pause. Your son Stellan was driving. Blood alcohol content 0.18. Houston PD has him in custody. Dr. Hampton, we need you here now. I was already moving. Keys, wallet, shoes. Lorraine appeared in the kitchen doorway, face pale. It's Sawyer, I said. Car accident. Stellan was drunk. I didn't wait for her response. The Lexus was in the driveway. I drove 2.7 miles in 4 minutes, breaking every speed limit, running 2 red lights at empty intersections. Texas Children's emergency entrance was lit up like an operating theater. I parked illegally and ran. Dr. Odom met me at the ER bay. Doors, a woman in her late 40s, dark hair, pulled back scrubs, splattered with what I hoped wasn't Sawyer's blood. Chest CT shows 250 milliliters pericardial effusion, she said, walking fast toward the elevator. Pulmonary contusion, right lower lobe. Vitals stable but deteriorating. We need to move. Where is he? Or 7, prepped and waiting. Marlene Blanchard is your surgical nurse, Luther Sinclair on anesthesia. They're standing by. The elevator doors closed. I forced myself to breathe. Stellan, I asked. HPD took him 20 minutes ago. 0.18 BAC, failed field sobriety, crashed into a light pole at the intersection of Kirby and Main. Sawyer was in the back seat, properly restrained, which probably saved his life. And Briar. We called her. She said she was out of town for Thanksgiving and couldn't get back until tomorrow. Out of town. Her son was in emergency surgery and she was out of town. The elevator opened on the surgical floor. I scrubbed in OR7's anteroom, 2 minutes of methodical washing, the ritual that cleared everything except the patient and the procedure. Marlene stood ready at the instrument table when I entered, a veteran surgical nurse in her 60s, with steady hands and eyes that had seen 1,000 emergencies. "And doctor," she said quietly. "He's ready." I looked at the table. Sawyer, 5 years old. Intubated, sedated chest, prepped and draped. His face was pale against the white sheets, a purple bruise blooming across his left cheekbone. Luther Sinclair, a tall black man with silver temples and 20 years of pediatric anesthesia experience, stood at the head of the table monitoring vitals. "Sats at 87%, Luther said. BP 90/60. pericardial pressure rising. We need to move, Dr. Hampton. I positioned myself at the table. Scalpel, retractor. The familiar choreography of opening a chest cavity. Let's bring him home, I said. Sawyer's heartbeat on the monitor, the same rhythm I'd heard the day he was born 5 years ago, in this same hospital, when Stellan had called me crying with joy to say he was a father. 4 hours. I worked with the precision that came from 3 decades of pediatric cardiac surgery, draining the pericardial effusion with a catheter, inspecting the heart tissue for damage, repairing a small laceration on the right ventricle, stabilizing the pulmonary contusion. Marlene anticipated every instrument I needed. Luther called out vitals every 5 minutes like a metronome. Hats climbing, Luther said at 1:47 a.m. 92%. Pericardial pressure normalized, I confirmed. Vitals holding, doctor, Marlene said quietly. He's fighting. At 2:34 a.m., I closed the chest cavity with careful sutures and stepped back. Good boy, Sawyer, I whispered. You're going to be okay. Lorraine was in the ICU waiting room when I came out still in my surgical scrubs. She stood and hugged me without speaking. He's stable, I said. He's going to make it. She cried against my shoulder. I held her too tired to cry myself. We stayed. Lorraine brought coffee from the cafeteria at 5 a.m. I sat beside Sawyer's ICU bed and watched the monitors, watched his chest rise and fall with mechanical precision. At 8:14 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning, his eyes opened. Iris's eyes, Stellan's eyes, still here. Papa Doc, he whispered around the breathing tube. I stood and leaned over the bed rail, taking his small hand carefully around the IV line. I'm here, buddy. You're okay? You're at the hospital and you're going to be fine. His fingers curled around mine, weak but deliberate. I miss pancakes, he whispered, with chocolate chips. My throat closed. I squeezed his hand very gently. When you're better, I said, we'll make them together. I promise. You can dump in all the chocolate chips you want. Okay, Papa Doc. His eyes closed again, drifting back into medicated sleep. But his hand stayed in mine. Lorraine stood by the ICU window, backlit by morning sun, filtering through Houston oak leaves turned deep gold in late November light. Outside, families were waking up to Thanksgiving dinners and football games and normal lives. You saved Sawyer, she said quietly. I looked at my grandson sleeping in the ICU bed chest, wrapped in bandages, monitors beeping their steady rhythm. Stellan's drunk driving had put him here. The conservatorship plot, the patent theft, the affair with Margot, the 22-minute delay that killed Iris, all of it had been building to this moment. My son sitting in HPD custody with a DUI charge and a critically injured child. My daughter-in-law out of town, unwilling to return. My grandson whispering about chocolate chip pancakes through a breathing tube. And me standing in an ICU on Thanksgiving morning, holding the hand of a 5-year-old boy who still called me Papa Doc despite 18 days of forced separation. Yeah, I said, I did. Lorraine turned from the window. What happens now? I looked at Sawyer's hand in mine, so small, fingers curled with complete trust. Now, I said quietly, it ends. I ended it the way I'd practiced medicine for 30 years, with evidence precision and witnesses who couldn't be discredited. Kezia had 4 evidence binders on her desk Monday morning, but the 5th piece of evidence, the one that would win everything, sat in a 14-year-old's iPhone. Aita Dr. Hampton. Kezia said at 8:34 a.m., gesturing to 2 people sitting in Norton Rose Fulbright's conference room. This is Patricia Mercer and her daughter Cassandra. Patricia stood and shook my hand. A woman in her early 40s with short brown hair and the cautious expression of someone who'd been subpoenaed and wasn't sure why. Beside her, a teenage girl with braces and auburn hair pulled into a ponytail watched me nervously. Cassandra lives 3 doors down from you, Kezia explained. Number 4247. And on September 19th, she was standing in her front yard filming oak trees for a photography assignment when the police arrived to serve you with the restraining order. I looked at Cassandra. She held an iPhone in both hands, turning it over and over. I didn't mean to film it, she said quietly. I was trying to get the leaves in the afternoon light. But then the police car pulled up and I just kept recording. Gail Townsend mentioned a neighborhood witness in one of her leaked memos. Kezia continued. It took me 3 weeks to track down which neighbor. Patricia called my office last Tuesday after seeing the subpoena notice. Patricia nodded. Cassandra showed me the video 2 months ago. I told her to delete it, didn't want her involved in adult problems. But she kept it anyway. I labeled the folder, Strange Stuff. Cassandra said. I didn't know what to do with it, but I knew it felt important. Kezia pulled out her laptop. With Patricia's permission, I've copied the video to our secure server. It's 6 minutes and 23 seconds. Time-stamped September 19th, 3:47 p.m. I need you to watch it before Friday's hearing. Friday, December 6th, 234th Civil Court. The conservatorship dismissal hearing, where Malcolm Brighton would present our counter-evidence and demand sanctions against Norton Hall LLP for conspiracy. Show me, I said. Kezia pressed play. The video started shaky. Cassandra's hands adjusting the iPhone angle. Oak branches filled the frame leaves deep red and gold in late afternoon sun. Then the perspective shifted, catching the police cruiser pulling into my driveway. 2 officers emerged. I recognized them, Officer J. Valdez and Officer T. Morrison, the same pair who'd escorted me from my own house while Breyer watched from the doorway. The audio was surprisingly clear. Wind noise, distant traffic, and then Officer Valdez's voice. Dr. Virgil Hampton. My voice off camera, yes. Sir, we have a temporary restraining order filed by Breyer Hampton, alleging verbal threats and erratic behavior. You're required to vacate the premises immediately and maintain a distance of at least 200 feet. The camera angle shifted again as Cassandra moved closer, zooming in on my front door. Breyer appeared in the doorway, face partially visible. She looked at the officers, then back into the house, then shut the door halfway. And then, clear as a confession, Breyer's voice slightly muffled but unmistakable, just keep saying he was yelling. They'll believe us. The video continued. Officer Morrison escorting me to my car. My Lexus backing out of the driveway. Breyer watching from the window phone pressed to her ear. Kezia paused the playback. Just keep saying he was yelling, she repeated. Spoken at 3:49 p.m., 2 minutes after the officers arrived while you were still being escorted from the property. The audio forensics team confirmed voice match to Breyer Hampton, 97% certainty. I sat back in my chair. Patricia watched me carefully. Cassandra still held her phone, nervous. She coached Stellan, I said quietly. Before I was even off the property. Told him what to say when the officers asked follow-up questions. Yes, Kezia confirmed. And Cassandra's testimony will corroborate that you showed no signs of agitation or aggression during the encounter. The video shows you complying calmly with officer instructions. Halloween brownies. 3 years ago. An 11-year-old remembered. Why did you keep it? I asked Cassandra. She looked at her mother, then back at me. Dr. Hampton, you gave me Halloween brownies 3 years ago when I was in 6th grade. I was too old to trick-or-treat, but I went anyway because my friends were going, and most houses just gave me weird looks. But you didn't. You gave me the same full-size brownies you gave the little kids. I remembered. Halloween 2021. I'd bought too many brownies from the Memorial Herman bake sale and decided to give them out instead of candy. I remembered that. Cassandra continued. And when I saw the police at your door and you looked so confused and sad, and then I heard that woman say to lie about you yelling, I knew something was wrong. You didn't look like someone who yells. You looked like the guy who gives sixth graders full-size brownies. Patricia's hand rested on her daughter's shoulder, pride and protectiveness mixed in her expression. So I kept the video, Cassandra finished. For 11 weeks. I didn't know if it would help or if I should show anyone or what. But I kept it. Conscience, Patricia said quietly. She told me 2 weeks ago. Said she couldn't sleep knowing someone might be getting hurt, and she had evidence that could help. I looked at this 14-year-old girl with braces and an iPhone, and a conscience that had preserved 6 minutes and 23 seconds of truth. Thank you, Cassandra, I said. You may have saved my life. She smiled, small, shy, uncertain. I just filmed some trees. Kezia closed her laptop. Friday at 2:34 p.m. Civil Court. I'll be presenting this as primary evidence alongside the Apple Watch data, the patent conspiracy, and the financial records. Malcolm Brighton has prepared a motion to dismiss the conservatorship with prejudice and sanctions against Norton Hall LLP for fraud. I looked at the 4 evidence binders stacked on Kezia's desk, 2 months of investigation, surveillance, financial forensics, witness interviews. And beside them, Cassandra's iPhone. Vindication coming, Friday, December 6th, all because a 14-year-old girl remembered Halloween brownies and knew that something felt wrong. But first, I had to face the courtroom. The courtroom felt smaller than I expected for something this important. Judge Margaret Holbrook entered courtroom 234 at 9 a.m. sharp, and I understood that the next 3 hours would either restore my life or end it. She was a woman in her mid-60s with steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. 23 years on the bench, Malcolm Brighton had told me. Fair, methodical, intolerant of theatrics or lies. The oak-paneled room held 30 gallery seats. Lorraine sat in the second row with Luther Sinclair, who'd driven from Texas Children's to support me on his day off. Cassandra and Patricia Mercer sat 3 rows back. At the petitioner's table, Stellan and Breyer flanked by 2 Norton Hall attorneys in identical gray suits. Celeste sat in the witness waiting area, hands folded in her lap, not meeting my eyes. I sat beside Malcolm Brighton at the respondents' table. Kezia sat behind us with 4 evidence binders and Cassandra's iPhone in a clear evidence bag. All rise, the bailiff called. Judge Holbrook took her seat. Be seated. Case number 2024-CV-08847 in the matter of the proposed conservatorship of Virgil Reed Hampton. Counsel proceed. The lead Norton Hall attorney, Richard Kemp, senior litigation partner, stood and delivered his opening in the tone of someone who'd won before he started. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Dr. Hampton, despite his distinguished medical career, has exhibited concerning signs of cognitive decline over the past 6 months. Memory lapses, confusion, inability to perform routine tasks. His own colleagues will testify he spoke for 12 minutes. Called 2 expert witnesses, a psychiatrist who'd never met me, and a neurologist who'd reviewed medical records Stellan had somehow obtained. Both testified about age-related cognitive decline patterns. Then Celeste took the stand. She wore a navy suit and pearl earrings. Professional, composed the picture of a concerned colleague doing her difficult duty. Dr. Ashford, Kemp said, how long have you known Dr. Hampton? 15 years. I completed my fellowship under his supervision. And in recent months, have you observed changes in his behavior? Yes. Celeste's voice was steady, practiced. I observed memory lapses over 6 months. He repeated questions during rounds, forgot basic surgical protocols he'd performed thousands of times. On one occasion, he couldn't remember a patient's name, a child he'd operated on 2 weeks prior. Lies, every word, but delivered with the authority of a physician who'd stood beside me in operating rooms for a decade. In your medical opinion, is guardianship necessary? Yes, Celeste said. for his safety and the safety of his patients. She testified for 17 minutes. I watched Stellan's face. He wouldn't look at me. Breyer stared straight ahead, expression blank. Then Malcolm Brighton stood. Your Honor, the respondent calls Kezia Whitfield to present counter-evidence. Kezia approached the bench with the first binder. Your Honor, I present 4 pieces of evidence. First, a sealed letter written by Iris Hampton 14 years ago, to be opened only in the event of legal action against Dr. Hampton by family members. She handed the envelope to Judge Holbrook. The seal was intact, notarized, dated March 2010. Judge Holbrook opened it carefully and read in silence for 90 seconds. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in the set of her jaw. This letter, Kezia continued, warns that Stellan Hampton has shown patterns of financial manipulation and recommends the creation of an irrevocable trust to protect Dr. Hampton's assets. Mrs. Hampton established such a trust the same week she wrote this letter. 14 years ago. Breyer's whispered voice filled the courtroom through the speakers. Just keep saying he was yelling. They'll believe us. Stellan's head snapped up. The Norton Hall attorneys exchanged glances. Kezia played the full 6 minutes and 23 seconds. The courtroom was silent except for Cassandra's video-audio officers whined Breyer's coaching my calm compliance. Third, Kezia said Houston Police Department incident report regarding a forged wire transfer authorization dated September 12, 2024, $750,000. Signature forensics confirmed forgery. HPD is investigating. She handed the report to the judge. Fourth, financial records showing Dr. Celeste Ashford filed a $4.8 million patent claim against Dr. Hampton 6 months before this conservatorship petition. Dr. Ashford's husband, Bradford Moss, is the senior partner at Norton Hall, LLP, who filed this petition. Judge Holbrook looked at Celeste. Dr. Ashford, is this accurate? Celeste's composure cracked. The patent claim is separate from... Is your husband Bradford Moss senior partner at Norton Hall, LLP? Yes, but... Did you disclose this conflict of interest to the court? Silence. Answer the question, Dr. Ashford. No, Your Honor. The gavel came down. One clean sound. Everything over. Judge Holbrook took a 20-minute recess. When she returned at 11:47 a.m., her expression was granite. But this court finds the conservatorship petition to be without merit and motivated by financial gain rather than concern for Dr. Hampton's welfare. Petition dismissed with prejudice. The temporary restraining order issued September 19th is hereby voided. Lorraine exhaled behind me. I felt Luther's hand on my shoulder briefly. Furthermore, Judge Holbrook continued, this court refers the matter of the forged wire transfer to the Harris County District Attorney for criminal investigation. Dr. Celeste Ashford and Norton Hall, LLP will be referred to the State Bar of Texas and the Texas Medical Board for professional conduct review. She looked directly at Stellan. Mr. Hampton, you are fortunate your father has chosen not to pursue criminal charges for the events documented in this evidence. I suggest you consider that mercy carefully. The gavel came down again. Court adjourned. I stood slowly. Malcolm shook my hand. Kezia smiled, small, professional, satisfied. Lorraine hugged me in the hallway. Luther clapped my back. Cassandra waved shyly from across the corridor, and I waved back. Stellan stood near the elevator alone. Breyer had already left. He looked at me as I approached, opened his mouth. Dad! I walked past him without turning. I drove home in silence. Murphy was waiting at the door tail, wagging whole body, wiggling with joy at my return. I knelt and buried my face in his fur for a long moment. Then I heated lentil soup on the stove, the batch Lorraine had made Tuesday, and 8 standing at the counter. At 1:14 p.m. on Friday, December 6th, I went upstairs and slept for the first time in 11 nights. The conservatorship was over, the restraining order voided, the conspiracy exposed. But one conversation remained. The conversation came 13 days later, and it wasn't the one I expected. 10 days after the hearing, Kezia asked if I'd read the sealed envelope she'd given me, and I wondered why her office suddenly had a lavender plant on the windowsill. "I haven't opened it yet," I admitted. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter, cream-colored, my name written in Kezia's precise handwriting. "Open it now," she said quietly. "Please." We were in her Norton Rose Fulbright office on the 32nd floor. The case file sat closed between us, 4 binders of evidence, all testimony, transcribed, all invoices paid. The conservatorship case was officially over. I'd come to sign the final documents. I pulled the envelope from my jacket pocket and opened it carefully. Inside, a Polaroid photograph, edges yellowed with age. A little girl, maybe 4 years old, standing in a hospital room. Brown hair and pigtails. Large, dark eyes. White bandages across her chest. Surgical tape visible above the collar of a pink hospital gown. Beside her, a young man in Texas children's scrubs. Dark hair, tired smile, one hand resting gently on her shoulder. Me, 30 years younger. November 1995. Attached to the photo with a paperclip and adoption certificate. Anna Marie Whitfield. Born July 14, 1991. Adopted March 3, 1996. I looked up at Kezia. She was crying. First time I'd ever seen her cry. November 7, 1995, she said quietly. Tetralogy of Fallot with pulmonary atresia. Emergency surgery. You operated for 6 hours. My birth mother couldn't afford the procedure. She was undocumented, terrified. You told her the hospital would cover it, that I wouldn't be turned away. The girl in the Polaroid had Kezia's eyes. 30 years ago. Anna Marie, you saved my life, Kezia continued. And when my birth mother couldn't care for me after the surgery, you helped arrange the adoption with the Whitfield family. You visited me in the hospital every day for 3 weeks, brought me books, read to me. I remembered. A tiny girl with bandages and fear and eyes too big for her face. I'd read her The Very Hungry Caterpillar 14 times because it was the only book that made her smile. I became a private investigator because I wanted to find people who were lost, Kezia said. But really I was waiting, watching. When Gail Townsend called me in September about a surgeon being targeted by his own family, I knew before she said your name. You didn't know who would pay you back, I whispered. No, but I did. She stood and crossed to where I sat. Today I say thank you. We embraced. She cried against my shoulder the way Lorraine had in the courthouse hallway. I held her and thought about the 4-year-old girl with pigtails and how time moved in circles we couldn't see. The lavender plant, I said finally. When did you get it? Yesterday. My daughter gave it to me. She's 3. I named her Iris. 7 days later, on December 23rd at 10:14 a.m., my doorbell rang. Sawyer stood on the porch, backpack on his shoulders, holding a folded piece of paper. Behind him, Briar sat in her car at the curb, engine running. She rolled down the window. Sawyer has something for you. Then she drove away. Sawyer looked up at me with Iris's eyes, the grandmother he'd never met, but carried in his genetics like a secret message. Papa Doc, he said. Are there pancakes? I made batter this morning, I said. Come in, son. Murphy appeared behind me, tail wagging, and Sawyer dropped to his knees to hug the dog. They stayed like that for a moment, boy and retriever, pure, uncomplicated joy. Inside, Sawyer unfolded the paper carefully. A drawing in crayon, a man and a small boy and a golden dog standing in front of a house. Above them, a lighthouse, tall and red-striped against a blue sky. I drew Papa Doc's house, Sawyer explained. And the lighthouse from the picture in your study. Cape Cod. The magnet on my fridge, a lighthouse Iris had bought in Provincetown 12 years ago, the summer before she died. Can I put it on the fridge? Sawyer asked. Yes. He ran to the kitchen. I followed slowly. The envelope sat there. Texas State Penitentiary. I put it in the drawer. I watched Sawyer search for the perfect spot on the refrigerator door, finally choosing the space beside Lorraine's radiation schedule and a takeout menu from the Thai place on Bissonnette. He placed the lighthouse magnet carefully over the top corner. Perfect, I said. Now pancakes. I mixed 4 pancakes worth of batter, heated the griddle, dropped in too many chocolate chips the way Sawyer liked. He sat at the kitchen table, legs swinging, Murphy's head resting on his lap. The first pancake came out golden brown. I flipped it onto a plate. Where's Daddy? Sawyer asked quietly. I set the plate in front of him. Learning things. When he's better, he'll come home. Okay. He didn't ask more questions. 3 pancakes for Sawyer, 1 for Murphy, who took it gently and carried it to his bed like treasure. The kitchen smelled like butter and chocolate, and the faint lavender scent from the plant Lorraine had brought yesterday. In the drawer beneath the counter, under the takeout menus and the warranty card for the microwave, I'd never registered, Stellan's letter sat unopened. Pre-trial detention. Harris County. I'd recognized the handwriting on the envelope, small, precise, the way he'd written thank you notes as a child. I didn't open it. Maybe I would tomorrow. Maybe next week. Maybe never. Sawyer looked up from his 3rd pancake, chocolate chips on his chin, and asked, More pancakes. I looked at the drawing on the fridge. At Murphy sleeping with his pancake crumbs. At this 5-year-old boy who'd survived his father's drunk driving and still believed in lighthouses and pancakes and Papa Doc. I didn't erase anything. The Polaroid stayed in Kezia's office. The lighthouse magnet held Sawyer's drawing. The letter stayed in the drawer. I stopped disappearing into other people's lives, Stellan's greed, Briar's schemes, Celeste's ambition. I stayed here. In my kitchen. With a boy who needed breakfast, and a dog who needed walks, and a sister who needed radiation appointments, and a life that was mine. Yes, I said. And to you, listening to my story, remember this. The people closest to you can either be your greatest blessing or your deepest wound. I spent 30 years building trust with my son, my mentee, my family. I thought that time, that history meant something unbreakable. Don't make my mistake, don't confuse longevity with loyalty. Trust isn't measured in years spent together. It's measured in actions when no one's watching. I learned that the hard way in a courtroom holding evidence of betrayals I never saw coming. What I want you to take from this family story is simple: protect yourself even from those you love. Document everything, keep your own records, and when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. I believe the Lord put Cassandra in my neighborhood filming oak trees on the exact day I needed a witness. His timing felt impossible to understand when I was locked out of my own home. But looking back, I see how he was protecting me all along, giving me exactly what I needed when I needed it most. If this grandpa's story resonated with you, please leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-protection? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more grandpa stories like this, real family stories about survival, betrayal, and second chances, please subscribe. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. Remember, certain details in this story have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes, but the lessons about trust, family, and resilience are very real. God bless you.